Sword of Coming Chapter 825. A dragon boat ferry named Fanmo at the edge of Xingyang Mountain withdrew its blindfolds and slowly returned north. On the side of the ferry, everyone in Luopishan fell into shape. Only Sui did not board the ship on the right, so she chose to travel far away with Yujian alone. Hongxia and Pei Xiang are still standing together. A successful walker of the Huajiao, a master of the Fox Country, both of Shanzi spirits, and now they are practicing in the Lotus Root Blessed Land, and every time Jisifeng discusses matters always feeling out of place, so it seems that the two sides are very dependent on each other. Even if there is nothing to talk about, they will stand together involuntarily. As for the previous opportunity of Paixiang's breakthrough, everyone saw it and no one took it seriously. Even Pei Xiang herself didn't think there was anything worth talking about. After all, even if she was in the Yupu realm tomorrow, how can it be? Zhou Xian's stature is rickety with his hands folded. He is chatting and laughing with the master in autumn. Xiao Mili holding a trekking stick flying around Pei Qian, twittering, talking about her while hovering in the wind with her little brother. She is similar to a radish camped in the field, not moving and stable. Very from beginning to end, there is absolutely no tension of drizzle size. Qin Lingjun again began to exert some mysterious natal magic powers, and the old Jianxiu who was alias to the upside-down Jade Pu realm became brother and brother. One said that he was very good at eating in Beiyue land boundary and Beiju Luzhou. He reported his name and he didn't have to spend money on drinking. The one who said that he was in Luxiazu and Ia's Hao was not well known, but he was inevitably inferior to his brother Jingqing. As for the lady of the mountain lord who has not yet been married by her own master, when Qin Lingjun boarded the ship in Ningyao, she was a little far away, just a few gliding steps, like a fish swimming through the crowd, clasping fists in both hands, respectful. After a tick to the end, his was so high that he was about to speak, but he was beaten by Cui Dongshan. He fell a dog to eat on the spot and lay down on the ground. Qin Lingjun was completely dead and shouted, "Jingqing pays homage to Mrs. Shanju." Ning Yao helplessly said, "Get up and talk." Qin Lingjun blurted out, "If you return to Mrs. Shanju, it will be cool on the ground. The man has gold under his knees and the more he kneels the more it is." In the early years when Pei Qian was in front of the jewels at the gate of Ningfa's house on the Great Wall of Jianqi, Ning Yao could barely adapt to the style of Luopa Mountain. In fact, on Qin Pingan's side she had heard many stories about this boy in Tsingyi. Whenever talking about Qin Lingjun, Ning Yao can even see Qin Pingan's face and eyes as if he sees a river and lake that does not lack good wine. Maybe Qin Lingjun didn't even know that the rivers and lakes he walked through had made up for many shortcomings in the heart of the young mountain owner. It seems that in the other rivers and lakes where Qin Pingan just passed by, I have never walked, but I have finally seen it. There are crowds of friends, coveted big bowls of wine, big pieces of meat, and gratitude. The boy in Tsingyi just got up and the big white goose moved up and kicked again. Qin Lingjun put out a defensive two-handed fist frame. Cui Dongshan closed his feet and turned around, and then suddenly turned around to punch again. Qin Lingjun immediately jumped and moved, and his palms lined with clouds and water to draw a fist pile. The last two glanced at each other, each nodded, stood still, raised their sleeves, angered their dantians and mastered tricks. Such a literary fight is more dangerous than a military fight. Murder is invisible and knowledge is greater than heaven. Jiang Shangzhen stood alone, standing by the railing. Cui Dongshan came to him, stood on tiptoe, leaned on the railing. "Plan to return?" Jiang Shangzhen nodded and said, "Wei Ying is okay to be a suzerain, but he may not know how to make a lot of money. Moreover, he should not point to my cloud caves. I need to come out in person, press the heads of many people and teach them how to bend over money. After this, when the site of the lower sect of Luopa Mountain is selected, I plan to take a trip to the Jianqi Great Wall ruins. There are some old accounts, so I have to calculate. At the moment, this dragon boat ferry is the only one missing the owner of the mountain." Jiang Shangzhen turned his head and glanced at the outline of Xingyang Mountain. The owner of the mountain is still too polite. I put the account book public to the public, and then let the Emperor of Bamboo make it clear that it is reasonable to present the facts and why the worship of the mountain should be removed. Cui Dongshan chuckled and said, "It is the end of our ancestor who moved to the mountain by his own ability. Compared with Xia Yunsui, the old sword fairy who likes to be a tortoise, he is still more heroic. You lose or die. Just die, upright and upright." Jiang Shangzhen twitched his mouth. He is rampant in the mountains and rivers on a continent, committing crimes for thousands of years, in the dark and in the dark, up and down the mountains, with at least a few thousand lives in his hands. Think of him as a hero? If I remember correctly, there are more than one or two sects in Guanlixian's family who have suffered a lot from Yuan Zhinya in his early years. Cui Dongshan is still a hippie smile. Chief Shou, you are boring when you talk like this. What is the excitement? Those young female cultivators in Cheongjifeng who have to commit themselves to the dignitaries, can't make it through, wait for death, make it through. Just wait eagerly to see other people's excitement. Jiang Shangzhen said lazily, helping people to light lanterns at night and helping people to hold umbrellas in the rain. In the end he was only disgusted with the lights and not bright, complaining that the rain wet his shoes. Cui Dongshan clasped his sleeves with both hands. You have to think so. Without these people, why should the strong rise up? On the road of life, the real mistakes, misses and losses are not the chances passed by, not the nobles who have missed, but the mistakes that have the opportunity to correct. Then miss it and lose it. Jiang Shangzhen smiled and nodded. This truth is enough to make me like an old man's mood to return to a beautiful boy in the dead wood in spring. Cui Dongshan casually said, in addition to Mr. S' hometown Huaihuang County, there are actually two other good places, called Xianxian Cave, the Golden Jade Jungle. Jiang Shangzhen curiously asked, is there another saying? Cui Dongshan said, under the Qingming world in the land of Jiangyi, a great dynasty, a large number of monastic geniuses called Wuling teenagers emerged. The most famous of these is Wang Yunlu, who is regarded as a rice thief by Yujing. In addition, the one who is also among the 10 young candidates is actually from there. As for the wild world, Lu Cha's big disciple Zhu Qi and 2 Tueshan 100 sword immortals and a few younger ones are not swordsmen, but they are all very qualified for cultivation and they all came from a small place. Jiang Shangzhen asked, did someone deliberately do it when he was behind the scenes? Cui Dongshan shook his head. This kind of thing that is easy to be condemned by the gods cannot be done by manpower. At most it is to pull a bit from the side, add oil to the trend and cut the wick. No one can create this situation out of thin air. Jiang Shangzhen asked, our mountain lord, what are you going to do after leaving and going back? Cui Dongshan blinked. Jiang Shangzhen turned around and began to write in the palm of his hand, and Cui Dongshan did the same. When the two opened their palms and held them together, the two laughed, their hearts understood and the heroes saw the same. Both of them wrote 4 words. Supreme Sovereign. Jianding Patriarch Hall was completely wiped out. An immortal carrying the sword peak was completely broken. Yujiao Peak was replaced by a mountain top. Several tributary hills of the old and new peaks were uprooted. And a private mountain and river of thousands of miles. The landscape was chaotic. At the moment the water level of the Shaoshu Lake in Qiling Mountain is as low as a stream, and the full moon peak is driven out of a cave road. Qiongji Peak has not only suffered the 3 swords of Chao Jun, but also has been washed by Mi Yuxiao light sword gas. The water carefully raised by Shuilong Peak E, previously suppressed by the Dragon King basket, is still trembling now. The ancient mirror of the treasure of the mountain in Yunfeng was too late to be put away. It was turned around at will just like a rattle in the hand of a child. Clouds gather and scattered, making a cloud peak, sometimes dark in night, sometimes bright in day. The sword repairs of the peaks of Xingyang Mountain prevented Lu Xianyang from climbing the mountain to ask the sword. There were not many dead, but dozens of people were injured and their hearts fell to the bottom. Enshrined Yuanbai rebelled against Xiefeng, transferred to Zhongyue Mountain Jun Jinqing and returned home by boat. Wu Tijing, who is regarded as Aquarius Island Little Wei Jin, and Li Tuanjing II, is missing. It is said that Zhu Fengshenwan received a letter from Wu Tijing. Master Zhu Huang swears that he is not a son of man, and he is not worthy of the status of Jianxiu. In the future the 2 masters and apprentices will meet again, and they will still be masters and apprentices, but he Wu Tijing will be the master and you will be the disciple. Dong Hu, the attendant of the Department of Rites of the capital city of Lily, doesn't have to worry about climbing or not climbing anymore. He writes a secret letter with a pen and gently blows the ink. His hand is italics and strict, which is both regular and not a bit freehand. Elegant style, so in the early years in the officialdom and literary circles of Dali, but he has the reputation of like a tiger-like brushstroke. It is indeed pleasing to the eye. After Dong Hu and Master Yamen Shangshu of the Ministry of Rites informed the situation, the old servant was all right and light, and ordered when the ferry goes north, people and the ferry are all leisurely in the white clouds. When Wei Jin was about to leave the ferry, Yu Huiting asked, Wei Shishu is going to see the young hermit? Wei Jin shook his head. No, this man's wine is too bad, there is nothing good to see him. Back then, at the Jianqi Great Wall, the liquor store sold liquor and he was the most money spent for buying liquor in the Wei and Jin dynasty. Yu Huiting knew that the arrogant Wei Shishu would never say such things if he had not regarded the hidden official as a friend. A celebration that originally congratulated the ancestors who moved the mountain into the 5 realms ended so dismal. Sovereign Zhu Huang is still personally responsible for cleaning up the mess. If it messes up, it is still a stall and it is still a clan head fairy family who is about to start the next sect. The Emperor Bamboo held his fists, respected the guests from Sifangtiandi and Zhufeng and smiled freely. The celebration has been cancelled. Today let you all go for a trip for nothing. Xingyang Mountain must return the gift and compensation afterwards. Lung Qi, the master of Qiangzifeng Peak, received the instruction from the suzerain, so that the Hua Mufang female cultivators who had turned pale, quickly removed all cases. Emperor Bamboo closed his gaze and said with his heartfelt voice to all the peak masters, no one should block the guests who leave Xingyang Mountain. There must be no dissatisfaction, no offensive words, just pretend to be given to me. Pretend to be a smiling face. Yan Zhonglu, you send someone to Jufeng Mountain and stare at all the people who send off guests. Once you find that offenders will be eliminated on the spot, if there are guests willing to stay in Xingyang Mountain, you will send someone to treat him well, keeping in mind this incense friendship in adversity, but so, you must cherish it. The Emperor Bamboo performed the supernatural powers of the envisioning Qi technique. Watching the weather in the mountains beyond the first-line peaks was scribbled and his vitality was greatly hurt. But the Emperor Bamboo was still not discouraged by this, but still in the mood and the old swords around him who had their own minds. The fairy joked. Unfortunately, the celebration has not yet started, so Qin Shanju and Lu Jianxian each climbed the mountain and asked about the sword. Otherwise we will receive the gift. How many holes can be made up, and then the landscape will be repaired so as not to tear down the east wall and repair the west wall. It's so overwhelmed that I have to embezzle money from the funds for the next site selection. Xia Yuan Chui ran with a long sigh. This teacher-nephew really has a good temperament. Even now his words can still be so calm and gentle. The full moon peak ancestor with the highest standing in Xingyang Mountain. For a while he suddenly lost his thoughts. The enemy is gone. If the Luopa Mountain can really stop here, will the full moon peak and the first-line peak of the Bamboo Emperor abandon their premonitions and cooperate sincerely? The god of wealth, Tao Yanbo, hesitated to speak but stopped. Yan Chu's face was full of surprises that couldn't be concealed, because the words of the Emperor Zhu were a smile with him, not with the of wealth in Qiulingshan. Obviously the original scenery of Qiuling Mountain is destined to decline. The tree fell down and scattered and people walked to cool tea. There are very few guests left. One after another, the ritual ferry boats are like flying birds in the mountains, and along the trajectory that looks like a bird road, they swept the sky and traveled far. Xingyang Mountain is a place of right and wrong and you cannot stay for long. The Emperor Bamboo sternly said, just take this opportunity to take advantage of this moment to enshrine the crowds of Keqing, and we will have the second meeting. Yan Chu immediately acted as the patriarch in charge, waving his hands sternly and said, the idlers and others are all hurrying down the mountain. Stay at the Tingjian Pavilion, don't walk around at will, and look back to the Patriarch Hall's orders. The Emperor Zhu smiled and said, since Yuan Jingye has been removed, the post of protecting the mountain at Xingyang Mountain is temporarily suspended. Tao Yanbo, what do you think? Regarding Yuan Jin's page of protecting the mountain for 1,000 years, the Emperor Bamboo still only talked about delisting, not about life and death. Tao Yanbo said miserably, Sovereign, for this disaster Qiulingshan cannot be blamed. I voluntarily resigned from my post and fought behind closed doors. The general situation is over. Struggling is useless. It will only commit the anger and affect the entire Qiuling Mountain. It is hated by the ambitious sovereign Zhu Huang. The Emperor Bamboo stared at Tao Yanbo and slowly said, then transfer from Yan Zhonglu to this position. Qiulingshan will be closed for 100 years from today. From now on, Qiulingshan's sword repairs will follow the first-line peaks. The arrangement of the Patriarch Hall should not be disagreeable. After the trouble of Tao Jiangxian's return to the mountain, please calm people's hearts. Xia Shirbode is highly respected. In this crisis, he had to bother Patriarch to leave the mountain and postpone his sword practice to act as the commander of the Patriarch Hall. Xianwei stroked his beard and groaned, I have no choice but to do so. Although Yen Chu was reluctant to give up, he thought he could serve as the god of wealth as the master of the rule, but he could still make a profit if he was able to manage the next 2 cases of money. Tao Yanbo was furious when he heard the words. He sealed the mountain for 100 years, and the first-line peak took over all Qiu Lingshan sword repairs. Is your bamboo emperor going to cut the meat with a blunt knife, cultivate the power of the Qiu Lingshan sword and kill them all? Once Qiuling Mountain has been banned for 100 years, wouldn't the roots of Jianxiu, especially the younger disciples of the 2 generations, all have to change their individual minds, learn from the Qinggu Peak and go to other peaks one by one to practice? Add bricks and tiles, you push me, each has its own difficulties and everyone pushes against the wall and all fools will. The Emperor Bamboo said, Tao Yanbo, do you have any objections? Tao Yanbo's face was uncertain, glanced at the jade medal hanging on the waist of Emperor Bamboo and finally shook his head. Although it was a discussion at the Patriarch Hall, the Emperor Zhou clearly did not give anyone a chance to say no words at all. Without the sword top of the Patriarch Hall, the Emperor Bamboo would speak in a word today. The Emperor Zhou turned his head and smiled at the female ancestor of Zifeng and said, Tianwan, your responsibilities remain the same and you still have 3 yuan Jingguoshuiyu Shanshui Dibao Shanmen intelligence. Tianwan looked flustered and said in a trembled voice, Sect Master, it is precisely because of the mistake of Jufeng's spy that we take the 2 young people lightly. Tianwan is hard to redeem and is willing to think about it like Tao Master. Emperor Bamboo smiled, shook his head and refused Tianwan's resignation. Of course he knew this girl, something was wrong. The Emperor Bamboo even determined that she and Luopa Mountain were either extremely related to each other or reached a certain covenant, but there was no way. This was the price Xingyang Mountain had to pay. It was Yixianfeng and his bamboo emperor who had to go with that Qin Mountain. The sincerity of the Lord's hands. Yen Chu's heartstrings tightened in an instant, and he didn't dare to care about what he was doing or not. After all, Shuilong Peak is the mountain that has always held the power of spy. Tianwan, this stinky lady who can't open which pot to mention. As for Zifeng, don't talk about the progeny, usually there is not even a handyman disciple, and only Tianwan has always been there to practice in secluded residence. It is not clear that this is to pour dirty water on Shulongfeng. The Emperor Bamboo's mood is complicated. The sovereign's state of mind is far less calm than on the surface. In fact, he is already exhausted. If there is a little bit of trouble, the Emperor Bamboo will feel that it is difficult to support a single tree. The truth is revealed, the hearts of the people are revealed, and the views are unobstructed. There is no need to look at the bewilderment and trepidation of the ancestors of the peaks on the Tingjian Pavilion, only to say that on the top of the sword, there are not stupid wine bags and rice bags or clever people with ghosts, or they are just sitting on the sidelines and choosing the clever grass. Emperor Bamboo smiled bitterly for no reason. Could it be that the old saying goes, well, the family does not enter the house? The Bamboo Emperor's field of vision quickly passed everywhere, trying to find the person's trace. Emperor Bamboo dared to assert that that person must be somewhere in the mountain at this moment. In the viewing pavilion built next to the cliff on Full Moon Peak, the 2 brothers and sisters of the Yunlin Jiang family remained. The plaque is a solitary cloud pavilion with gold characters on a black background. Open the door in the morning and the mountains are covered with snow, watching the wind and the pine trees of the cranes, the years are thrown away, the heart and the moon are originally round in the evening, the drunken dream falls into the woods, the gentleman's daylight ascends the way, the flowers and trees are for true appreciation, the incense is burned to listen to the rain. Jiang Xing in the pavilion questioned, in this way, does Xingyang Mountain still have the face to start the next sect? The Emperor Bamboo, who was the Lord, was like a walled master which opened Jiang Xing's vision. The monks on the mountain of Aquarius Island and the wealthy tycoons at the bottom of the mountain all saw this scene, and Jingguoshuiyu closed too late. What's more, I heard that the Confucian Temple has lifted the ban on the Shanshui Dibao, and Xingyang Mountain can at least control the eyes of others today, but it can't control the mouth. Jiang Shan, who is a Confucian gentleman, nodded and said, of course. The Emperor Bamboo is actually a supreme master with great city government and resilience. This kind of person, wherever he cultivates, will be like a fish in water. It seems that as long as he is not killed by others and grabbed a straw or 2 for him, he can reach the top again. Jiang Xing was shocked at the moment. Hearing the words big brother seemed to make her feel more absurd than seeing Lu Xianying questioning the sword field by field and then climbing all the way to the top. Jiang Shan said, the next sect was established without any suspense. Together with the Xinjiang Mountain sect, it is nothing more than repeating the same mistakes together and becoming the situation of the previous hundreds of years. It is like being stepped on the head by Li Tuanjing alone, and it is too heavy to breathe. Of course, Xinjiang Mountain's situation is even more precarious this time, because Luopa Mountain is not Fenglai Garden. There is more than one sword fairy. Besides, the two mountain owners Qin Pingon and Li Tuanjing are both sword fairy. Same. Jiang Shan looked around, and the hearts of a Xinjiang Mountain, the clouds and rain gathered and scattered, the glazed glass was brittle, scattered and brittle, and after a few inquiries about the sword, it was indeed vulnerable. Wei Liang's so-called dismantling is actually the essence of cutting. Jiang Shan smiled and said, through the hunting envoy Chao Ping, he has made a certain degree of distinction from the Dali court and the Dali frontier army. I can't say all of them, but it is of great significance. It is very likely that they will be transferred to Shijianhu to practice by. Let Zhongyue Jinqing and Zhenjingzong besiege the Xinjiang Mountain Xiazong in the old Juiying area. The Nanyue Prince pick Qishan, the water of Yongjiang, and the old Jiao Jiao of Fengshui cave of Qiantang River near our home. If you have a choice to do this, you need the young mountain owner of Luopa Mountain, who spends a lot of mountain incense, secretly cultivated contacts, and exchange of genuine benefits. This is just the first step. Jiang Shan whispered, the second step is for the inside of Xinjiang Mountain. The swordsmanship of Yunfeng and Pianyufeng will be repaired. All the sword immortals who used to take the lead in the frontline peak ancestor hall will sit down with them forever. The same sect at the end of the discussion separating the two groups of people can make the scattered sand more scattered, and most importantly, it is the backhand hidden in it. For example, let Xinjiang Mountain Shang sect and the future next sect from today on a certain kind of division that cannot be bridged begins. If I were the young hidden official of Luopa Mountain, the question of the sword was over, and after leaving there would be a fourth step. On the surface, it seemed that Xinjiang Mountain would be left alone. Of course, whoever would like to ask the sword of Luopa Mountain would be extremely welcome. Luopa Mountain is equivalent to giving the Dali court a face, leaving a step for both sides. Only in the dark, together with you and Jinjing sect, fully aimed at the lower sect of Xinjiang Mountain. Very simple. As long as it is not from Boyun Peak, the sword repairs on these hills don't even think about having a good life, and no one even dared to go out and practice. Jiang Xing questioned, on the surface? The fourth step? Jiang Shan smiled and said, Egret Crossing and Qinggu Peak have long been out of climate. Full Moon Peak Xiaoyuntue is best aware of the current affairs. Qiangzifeng Lingqi is best at climbing strong people. Yanchu likes to drill camp, only profit. Autumn makes the mountain lose almost one. It is equivalent to Yuan Jinye, who was enshrined by his own mountain guard, the most vitally injured. Otherwise Tao Yanba is actually the most suitable and most promising candidate to be the next suzerain. Regardless of the reason Xinjiang Mountain fell here, and Li Tuanjing was the same year. It's totally different for a man to crush Xinjiang Mountain. Li Tuanjing can ask Jian Xinjiang Mountain at will and kill any sword repairman, but the 300 years of Xinjiang Mountain has been under pressure, and the same enemies are quarrelsome, because no one feels a garden of wind and thunder. Li Tuanjing, it is true that Xinjiang Mountain can be destroyed, but Luopa Mountain's joint ceremony is different. Therefore this ceremony is the third step of the young hidden official, letting everyone in Xinjiang Mountain from the ancestor to all the youngest disciples. I understand one thing in my heart. Don't fight against Luopa Shan. Vengeance is all idiotic dreams. Older ones can't beat them. The younger generation is the most outstanding. Yulin is embarrassed to lose. Wuta's capital is gone. This is the chaos. I can't fight with tactics, and it's very disparity. Head on, break your wrists, let alone talk about it. That being the case, Jiang Xing, I ask you, if you are Xinjiang Mountain's predecessor, the cultivation in the mountains needs to continue. What can you do? Jiang Xing asked tentatively. Infighting? Jiang Shan nodded but shook his head again. No. Jiang Xing said angrily, come back. Jiang Shan, who rarely drinks, took out a jug of wine, took a sip, leaned against the pavilion and looked at the Yixian Peak. In the eyes of outsiders, it is infighting. But in the eyes of Xinjiang Mountain it is natural. Each has its own contention. The outer sects are competing for personal status, the direct legends are competing for the rankings of the peaks, and they are competing for the sword-making needs of the heavens, materials and treasures. There is no distinction between fame and fortune. It is not easy to walk on the road. Contending. It will only compete more fiercely than before, because I suddenly discovered that Xinjiang Mountain, which was invincible on a continent in my mind, is not a potential replacement for the existence of the gods. Even if the frontline peak ancestors are rebuilt, it seems that they will meet every day. It's in danger and am worried that one day it will be gone. Zhou Xian carried the wine flask, raised his arm and drew a big circle. In the past, Xinjiang Mountain could continuously expand, so that many hidden dangers hidden in the depths can be ignored temporarily, or even have the opportunity to remain ignored. Then Zhou Xian drew a small circle the size of a palm. It seems to be reduced to such a small sight now. In the end, Zhou Xian drew another circle between the big circle and the small circle with the hip flask in his hand. Although it is actually so big, people will not be so optimistic. Going to extremes, from the once blind optimism, the eyes are above the top. I feel that the mountains and rivers of the whole continent are the gates of the monks of Mount Xinjiang. They have become blind and pessimistic as they are today, and there is no more sorrow, so I had to stare at the 1 acre 3/4 a few steps away from my toes. Jiang Xing frowned. Just listening to you, it's already so complicated. Isn't it even more exaggerated to do it? Zhou Xian smiled and said, it's not complicated to do it. I'm an outsider, so I don't want to comment casually, but I just say it really not complicated. In short, Qin Pingan's questioning sword did not end there but just started. In the next first questioning the sword, Jiang Shan guessed that the place where the sword Immortal of the Qingshan sword fell in Luopa Mountain was chosen by the master of Xinjiang Mountain. Jiang Xing complained, just listening it will annoy me. Condescending, outlines and controls, it will be solved easily and it will happen naturally. Jiang Shan pointed to the meandering water named Yanji Creek on the ground outside the cliff and smiled. Since Luopa Mountain has helped Xinjiang Mountain to carve a riverbed, then people's hearts will flow like water from now on, and they will naturally flow through it. People step into it without realizing it. Jiang Shan got up suddenly, got up again with the steps of the pavilion and asked with a smile. Master Qin, I don't know if I have such a simple opinion, is there anything wrong? Qin Pingan, who had gone back and returned with a smile, said, it's all right, there is no major omission. But it is far less mysterious and lofty than Jiang Junzi said. In my opinion, the foundation of the world's knowledge is only the word patient. Jiang Shan pondered for a moment, then smiled and nodded. Qin Shanju has unique insights, and it is indeed more concise than what I said in one sentence. Qin Pingan knew that this person was waiting for him. Then come and meet the future patriarch of Yunlin Jiang's family. Jiang Xing was horrified, turned his head abruptly, and saw an unexpected guest who was returning. Xinjiang Mountain has really fallen into blood mold for 8 lifetimes, and it has been exposed to such a lingering ghost. I saw the man smiling slowly as he walked up the steps. The young mountain lord of the fallen mountain, the last hermit of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, changed his costume and wore a crown of lotus flowers that transgressed the Daoist tradition. Qingsha Dao robe, foot on the cloud shoes, holding a white jade Ganoderma in the hand, the spirit of the ethereal cloud and water body, the so-called fairy-style Dao bones in the Xianxia Jiguayan mysterious novels. But so, sitting in the pavilions, Jiang Shan smiled and asked, Master Qin, would it be better if you didn't kill Yuan Jingye? Qin Pingan said, just talking about the results will be better. But you can't do things just because the final result is right. You can use any means in many links to manipulate people's hearts and play with people's hearts, even if the results are the same. But there are some differences. It is a world of difference in my heart. What does Mr. Jiang think? Not killing Yuan Jingye left Xinjiang Mountain a great accident. In fact, Qin Pingan could indeed do this even without knowing it. At the time he sacrificed a cage on the back of Jianfeng. The bird is fine. Jiang Shan nodded and said solemnly, yes. Qin Pingan smiled and handed over a pot of Qingshan wine brewed in his own wine shop. It's not a good wine and the price is not expensive, but I don't have much inventory here and I drink a pot less than a pot. Jiang Shan thanked him, took the hip flask, took a sip, took another sip and finally said, it seems like a taste. Qin Pingan said seriously, that must be because Junzi Jiang drank less. Jiang Shan changed the subject. Lord Qin Shan, why didn't Yuan Zini's past resumes behave tyrannically and indiscriminately killing innocent people, and then tell a continent today? In this way there will always be less unclear truth. Infamy on the mountain. Even if it's just the simplest thing to choose, such as Yuan Zini's relocation of 3 broken mountains that year, he didn't even bother to let the local court inform the people that the ordinary woodcutter in the mountain would eventually be in vain. Qin Pingan shook his head and smiled. Even if you know the truth, you should still scold you, let alone those mountain monks who don't know the truth. They can't stop them. Luopishen is too easy to talk, is reasonable in everything, abides by the rules and scolds less. Some people will have no fear, and Luopishen is hard to speak and scolds a lot of secrets, but dare not provoke us. Since it is difficult to have the best of both worlds, be pragmatic and get some tangible benefits. Zhou Xian thought for a while. Reasonable. The Confucian gentleman put down his hip flask, sat down with his neck facing the young mountain master and said with a smile, "If Xingyang Mountain is allowed to rise step by step, it will eventually become the first gate of Kendo in Aquarius, at least in my opinion. It will be a big joke." Jiang Xing looked embarrassed. She was thin-skinned. Did her elder brother forget about things after drinking? It was our Yunlin Jiang who helped Xingyang Mountain to establish something through the next sect. Qin Pingon glanced at this bloated old Longqing Fu family's daughter-in-law. It was a little strange. Jiang Shan and Jiang Yun were very smart. It seemed that this woman was the only one who was not particularly smart. To support Xingyang Mountain's creation of the next sect, Yunlin Jiang's selfishness is naturally somewhat, but it can't be said to be too partial because Xingyang Mountain is still unclear at the moment, and the Confucian Temple is about to attack the barren world. The condition is that Xingyang Mountain must take out a considerable amount of extra sword repairs and rush to the barren world, plus the quota of Daoist clan. In this way, Xingyang Mountain peaks sword repairs. After the two groups of men and horses go down the mountain, there will not be a few left, and this time to swim out of the sword is not a child's play. At the ferry crossings in the wild world, even the Dali cavalry needs to obey orders, and Xianxia wants to make money again. Dispel disaster, it's difficult. Therefore there is nothing wrong with Jiang Shan's words and outspoken disapproval of Xingyang Mountain. This Jiang Xing cannot be guilty of conscience. However, if it weren't for today's questioning sword with the life-saving ability of the old sword immortals in Xingyang Mountain, the same trick could be repeated, using the sword and life of the sword repairing the clouds and the peaks to help the front-line peak fame and fortune. Jiang Shan knew more about the truth about the Great Wall of Jianqi than Jiang Xing, who had been married to old Longqing. That battle under the city replaced Ning Yao and Jianzhan Lizhen. A siege carefully set up by Jiashan account. Bamboo, Lizhen, Yusi, Tan Lu Bai, these 5 genius sword repairers who are not lacking in teachers, opportunities and aptitudes are all among the 100 sword immortals in Tuyue Mountain. As a result, Qin Pingon not only succeeded in getting out of trouble, but also killed Lu Bai. Nan Shouqin Bei Yinguan. Leading the line of hermits and sitting in the summer palace is equivalent to winning the Hauran world for about 3 years, retaining the seeds of the ascending city sword repair to the greatest extent, making the ascending city stand out in the colorful world, opening up the territory and expanding the land far better than the remaining forces. I heard that the new owner of Tuyue Mountain, the nominally barren world co-owner, was brilliant, and he had specifically targeted Qin Pingon on the battlefield. Staying alone at the head of the city for many years, confronting a throned demon dragon lord. As a result of the discussion at the Confucian Temple, I heard that the owner laughed when he returned home. At that time the two worlds were facing each other and they talked about Qin Pingan's big demon. It is rumored that Zhou Qinggao, who is in a high position, is Wen Hai's close disciple, but he has always hoped to go back to the chess game with Qin Pingan, but he couldn't ask for it. Jiang Shan admits that he is far inferior to his peers. Except that the young hermit did not have enough realm back then, he failed to kill a head of Ascension realm with his own hands on the battlefield and engrave the city head. This young man from Aquarius Island seemed to have done everything else. But in fact Jiang Shan knows very well that in the future, there will be such a small group of people on the Aquarius Mountain. Even if you know these news and inside stories, you will still feel that Qin Pingon was not a sword repairman in the Yupu realm back then, and was worthy to be the hidden official. How worthy is Hauran sword repair? Some people think that the strong are right, even those who are trampled by the strong. Some people think that the strong are wrong, even those who are sheltered by the strong. Qin Pingon looked out with both hands and sleeves as if after the storm, the green mountains were still there, and the clouds and water were even more unharmed. After a moment of silence he turned his head and smiled. Jiang Shan, you family Jiang from Yunlin, or are you interested in being Xingyang? The supreme sect master behind the mountain? Jiang Shan had some regrets, shook his head and said, after all, it is not the work of a gentleman. Qin Pingon stood up and nodded with a smile. Fortunately, I am not even a sage in academy. Jiang Shan followed up and asked, "Does Qin Shanju want to do it himself? Will there be any opinions from the Confucian temple?" Qin Pingon shook his head and said, "How could it be? I'm a serious scholar, I can't do this kind of thing." Jiang Shan asked tentatively, "The master of Xingyang Mountain's next sect, is that Yuan Bai whose name has not been officially written off in the landscape genealogy?" Qin Pingon smiled and said, "I originally recommended one person with the Emperor Bamboo sect. The second seat of Zhenjingzong will enshrine Lu Jimao. It will be very difficult to change the door and become the next sect master. Maybe you will have to tear your face with the Emperor Bamboo and make a big fight. Field, obviously Junzi Jiang's proposal is better." Jiang Shan looked surprised and reluctantly shook his head. "Master Qin, this is not kind." Qin Pingon clasped his fist and said, "Jiang Shan, you friend, I've made a deal. Must be a bad friend." Jiang Sheng couldn't speak anyway, just sitting by and listening to the conversation between the two. At this moment she had only owed her hand before and took the flying sword to pass the letter. "Brother, you are even more powerful. You know who this guy is? Yes, or drinking and chatting again, are you okay now? Still, yes or not?" Jiang Shan looked around, somewhat surprised because the expected Emperor Bamboo did not show up near the pavilion. It seems that this young hidden official is still kind. Qin Pingon smiled and said, Jiang is not kind to think so." Jiang Shan hugged his fists and said goodbye. He just didn't forget to take the pot of wine and walked a long way out of the Guyun pavilion. Jiang Shan glanced back at the pavilion. There is no one in the pavilion. This is very kind. Just a few digressions with myself. Outside Qinggu Peak, beside the Egret crossing, passing by the Cloud Tower, and Ai Yuerong, who had just returned to the inn in despair, was still dull and speechless. She stared blankly at the young Daoist, with the lotus crown on her head. "Come again?" Qin Pingon asked for the style room again, and then quietly waited for the conclusion of the discussion of Emperor Bamboo, and then rushed to hear the news. Lying on a wicker chair with my eyes closed, basking in the sun, turning my head and looking around, I saw a fool who actually made a snowman in the summer. Sort of coming. Chapter 826. Qin Pingon got up and came to the railing, facing the person on the side of Bai Ludu, gently waving the white jade Ganoderma in his hand. Lu Jimao, the true monarch of Zhejiang who returned to Bai Ludu, took a closer look and saw the accountant of his own Xianxia island in the past. He was dressed in a presumptuous Taoist costume. However, it is estimated that God sect Qi Tianjun saw it with his own eyes, and now he only opens close one eye. Lu Jimao let out a big laugh. Yufeng came to Guyun Tower and fell, clasped his fist and said, Qin Shan's question of the sword this time makes people fascinated. Qin Pingon put away the white jade Ganoderma lucidum into his sleeve, smiled and clasped his fists in return. "I have seen Lu Zhenjuan." It turned out that the flying sword of the previous line of peaks, like 100 flowers dazzling all the peaks, Lu Jimao got a secret letter from Qin Pingon, saying that after the question of the sword was over, he was asked to rush to the Egret crossing to discuss something. Qin Pingon handed over a pot of Qingshan wine and said straight to the point, "I plan to make a statement with Xingyang Mountain and recommend Lu Zhenjuan as the sect master of Xingyang Mountain. It's just that people are not as good as the sky and things have changed in the middle, so I had to let Lu Zhenjuan go for nothing." Lu Jimao took the hip flask and did not rush to open the mud seal to drink. God knows it is a toast and fine wine. Besides, it sounds like falling clouds. What is this all about? I am enshrined by the chief of Zhenjingzong. On the golden jade genealogy enshrined in Yugui Zongzu Shirtang, the names are very high and they are the lord of Xingyang Xianxia sect. Mr. Accountant has a good calculation. But let Lu Jimao make his own choice or some choices. For example, on the premise that Jiang Shangzhen and Wei Ying don't hate this matter, Lu Jimao really doesn't mind pushing the boat along the river and agreed to this move. After all, it's Lu Laoqing who is always strong. Liu's body is already a fairyland, and Lu Laoer has good cultivating qualifications. As long as there is no disaster and no accidents, he can live for another 1,000 or 800 years without any problem. Furthermore, the Lord and Chief consecrate according to the unwritten rules of the mountain. Seemingly one step away, but in reality, it is thousands of miles away. Lu Laoqing was able to make an exception and promoted from worship to supreme. It was because of Sun Yuan's incense love, plus Jiang Shangzhen's old love. Wei Ying was busy returning to Tongyi's Hao. Taking over as the supreme sect master, he didn't make a difference, or said he didn't want to lose Jiang Shangzhen's face. Therefore, the fourth suzerain in the history of Zhenjingzong 9 out of 10, it will be the Yuguazong who will send someone over to take over Lu Laoqing in the future. Anyway, it will definitely not be Lu Jimao. This is superficial officialdom, Lu Jimao. Men urging. Wei Ying doesn't look down on herself too much so that the Yugui Patriarch's Hall today has so many chairs empty. Lu Jimao, as the chief consecration of the next sect, still has not been able to get a place. It is so inconsistent with etiquette. What can you say? I didn't dare to complain a few words in private. Since there is no one in the court, there is no mountain and reliable, so I just confess my fate obediently. In the end, Lu Jimao was born in the Yupu realm of Xianxia. On Qin Pingan's side, he made no secret of his regret and said with emotion, "This is not possible, it is a pity." With the help of Shijianhu, it becomes a genealogy enshrinement. If you can use the real-world sect to become the head of another family, this will be called Xunyuo's death and life. A Shanzhua Yishio who is accustomed to stray dogs digging around for food, there is nothing he dare not think, there is nothing he dare not do. Lu Jimao raised his hip flask and smiled heartily. No matter what, Qin Shan's kindness has been accepted. If you have similar good things in the future, you should be the first to think of Lu Jimao. Qin Pingan raised the hip flask, touched it lightly, nodded and smiled. I can't guarantee anything, but I can look forward to it. Lu Zimeo's eyes lit up when he heard it, even if he knew it might be this guy's nonsense. But there was some hope in the end. It was better than spending time in the real-world sect every day without seeing the slightest light. Lu Jimao took a sip of the drink and heard Qin Pingan say that this is the Xianxia drink produced by his shop. Ordinary mountain wines such as Xinjia wine, you can drink it as soon as you drink it, and what else can you drink? Lu Jimao took only one sip today and then aftertaste frowned slightly to show respect, and then gently gnawed to show good wine. Qin Pingan lay on the railing and shook the jug gently. Lu Jimao didn't come here for a drink either. He glanced at the man next to him. For a moment Lu Jimao felt like a world away. He couldn't believe that he was like a duckweed and his life could only be whirled by the water. I walked here step by step and gave others wine, but others didn't dare not pick it up and they didn't dare to say it was not good. At the gate of Xianxia Island, there are still those few account rooms. The unsuccessful big disciple Tian Hujuan, every time he goes to Xianxia Island to meet Master and participate in the discussion, he dare not look at it again. His eyes will go around intentionally or unconsciously. Open the house over there. I believe that the young people of Xingyang Mountain in the future, whether it is Yujian or Yufeng, will almost be like this as long as they pass the ruins of the immortal back Jianfeng, with resentment hanging on their faces and awe engraved in their hearts. Lu Jimao drank quickly and put away his empty hip flask into his sleeves. Since Qin Ping's posture today does not seem to be an old account, Lu Jimao is in a relaxed mood. He is no longer worried when he came on the road. Mr. Accountant, who became the sword Immortal inexplicably, feels that Xingyang Mountain is not too satisfying after finishing cleaning up, so he has to add up with Xianxia Island. After all, Lu Jimao knew very well that when Qin Pingan left Shijianhu, he actually failed to accomplish many things such as changing customs. Lu Jimao sighed for no reason. I can eat well today, dress warmly and sleep well, and I can get up tomorrow. It is a good life on the road of spiritual practice. A pot of good drinks, two people who have nothing to do talk a few gossips. Qin Pingan smiled and said, Emodao, gossip is gossip and often things come from gossip. Lu Jimao nodded and said, it is indeed an old liar who is hard to buy. Qin Pingan turned around and said, the Emperor Bamboo will be here right away, so I want send Lu Zhenjuan. I will have the opportunity to be a guest at Chunting Mansion in the future and drink with Lu Zhenjuan to reminisce about the past. Lu Jimao smiled and nodded. Yufeng left. He was once again in a relaxed state of mind. He was once again worried. What he thought was to quickly review the actions of several disciples including Tian Hujuan over the years. In short, this Mr. Settle it to yourself. Qin Pingan glanced at the direction of Yixianfeng. The discussion was over. The sword immortals of the peaks and the priests went back to their homes and went back to their homes. Looking again at the figure of the true monarch Zhejiang, Qin Pingan took a sip of wine. The breeze blew his face and looked up, white clouds rising from the mountains and the water circling the green mountains. The ancestors on the mountain, the officialdom rules, the law of the army, the justice of the world, the customs of the village. No matter who you are, as long as you are in it, you must follow the rules. For example, the old Shijian Hu Lu Laoqing on Miaoliu Island, and Lu Jimao on Xianxia Island are the gods who turn their hands and cover the clouds and rain. The only rule is that when the Zhenjingzong takes over the Shijianhu, most of Xianxia's transformation, becoming a genealogical immortal master, must follow the rules of Yuguazong, including Lu Laoqing and Lu Jimao. The entire Shijianhu Yeshio is like a school child, entering a school, rereading the book to learn the truth, but some people learn fast, others learn slowly. Behind the corridor outside the house, there was a soft knock on the door. It was the footsteps and voice of Ni Yuerong, the treasurer of the inn, saying that the Lord was coming and he wanted to see him. Qin Pingon turned his head and smiled. "Please come in." Sovereign Zhu Huang and Ni Yuerong, who was born in King Yufeng, crossed the threshold together. The latter was holding a scroll with a white jade axis. After arriving at the viewing platform, Ni Yuerong brought a table and 2 futons and she knelt down again. The scroll was unfolded on the case table. It was a painting of an elegant collection written by the Xianxia. She raised her head and glanced at the Lord. The Emperor Bamboo nodded slightly, and then Ni Yuerong raised her right hand followed by her left hand. Holding the cuffs, twisting an incense burner from the silk cloth picture scroll, and suddenly purple smoke curled up on the table, she took out a set of white porcelain tea sets that were as white as jade, put the 2 teacups on both sides of the table and finally held it. Put out a pot of Xianxia melons and fruits and put it in the center. After finishing all these chores, Ni Yuerong sat on her knees and folded her hands on her knees. She watched her nose and nose without squinting her eyes. She neither dared to look at the Lord Zhu Huang nor the lotus flower on her head. The Crown Mountain Lord Sword Fairy, Luopa Mountain and Jingyang Mountain, the 2 mountain owners who have forged feuds, each sit on one side. There is no atmosphere at all, it is more like 2 old friends drinking tea here. The grievances on the mountain. It is not that the 2 groups of city teenagers under the mountain ended in a fight, each threatening to wait and then hacking you to death. Is the mainstay of the surging river, and the stone is still there after 1,000 years of water. The Emperor Bamboo smiled and said, "Ni Yuerong, you leave first and then call you if you have something to do." Not worrying about her secretly spreading a letter to Shulongfeng Yanchu is tantamount to looking for death. Ni Yuerong immediately got up without saying a word, graciously politely, and Xianxian left. The Emperor Bamboo raised the teacup and said with a smile, "Take tea instead of wine and the hospitality is not good. Don't be surprised by Qin Shanju." Qin Pingon stretched out his fingers, held the teacup and smiled, "Don't worry about drinking tea." The Emperor Bamboo nodded and really put down the cup. Qin Pingon asked with a smile, "I don't know if Sect Master Zhu came here to visit the Yunlu. What is it for me? If Yanchu and his like were here, they would probably swear in their hearts that they would be too rampant and bullying." But the Emperor Bamboo looked as usual and said, before Qin Shanju returned to Luopa Mountain, he wanted to determine how to settle this old account completely. From then on, Luopa Mountain walked on Yangguan Road and Xingyang Mountain walked on the single-plank bridge. Don't bother. I believe that as a person, Lord Qin doesn't need to make any landscape contract. Luopa Shen will do what he says. Qin Pingon looked around and after taking back his gaze he slowly said, "Xingyang Mountain is able to have today's family business, and Sect Master Zhu has done a great job. As the head of the family, a leader of the family must not delay his own practice, but also dealing with the multitude of messy tasks. It is hard work, whether you are in the palm of your hand or the of wealth. Even if you look at it from the side, you may not be able to understand it. Not to mention those who are in the shade of ancestors but do not know the blessing. Pass it again." The Emperor Bamboo directly pointed out what the other party meant and smiled and said, "Qin Shanju wants to say that today's disturbance, I must blame the Emperor Bamboo for ineffective restraint. Actually, it has nothing to do with Yuan Zhenye." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "When I was young I turned over the book and saw 2 sages' teachings of good words. They can be applied everywhere. It means that the dawn will rise at dawn, and the courtyard must be cleaned inside and outside. The portal must be personally inspected. At the foot of the mountain, a family and a surname, and even so, let alone the lord of a sect with gods everywhere on the mountain." The Emperor Bamboo smiled and said, "So there is no more to talk?" Qin Pingon said, "You said there is no need to chat." "Not necessarily there is no need to chat. I said there is a chat, there must be a chat. If you just kindly give away the sage principles in a book to the Emperor Bamboo, there is no need to chat. I have to be. How boring is that you are willing to pinch your nose and swim through the cloud tower again?" The Emperor Bamboo said in a deep voice, "Then please don't make a mistake, Qin Shanju. You can say something straight, okay?" The Emperor Bamboo will do the same. "No, the peaks of Xingyang Mountain can only be broken jars and fall. Guests, return by boat, just smash the old and new peaks, cut off the incense of my Xinjiang Shanzu Shirtang from now on. This has just started and has already run out of patience and began to talk cruelly? Qin Pingon smiled without saying anything. Yao thinks that I was drinking with Lu Jimao at the same table when I was in that book Jinhu back then. My patience is much better than your bamboo emperor. As for the dangerous degree of the situation, I went to Mialia Island to find Lu Laoqing, and it was even more unpredictable than if the Emperor Bamboo came to the Yunlu to find me. But the Emperor Bamboo quickly put away the conversation because an uninvited guest came like a bird falling on a branch. She appeared behind, shook her two sleeves and said to Qin Pingon, called Mr. Sheng, and then this Zufeng woman, the ancestor Tianwan, sat on the floor and looked at the Bamboo Emperor with a smile, even like a crazy woman who got into trouble, took out the vanity mirror and the powder box from her sleeve, and began to apply it to her face, shaking her head and saying, "It's not reasonable. People who are not annoyed by reason just want to annoy you with reason. What can I do?" The Emperor Zhu was too lazy to look at this and Taoist Tianwan. He just picked up the jade card hanging from his waist and put it on the table. The Immortal was on the top of the sword before, supporting at most a stick of incense, and now there are new ones. A stick of incense is over. Qin Pingon looked embarrassed. The courtesy is heavy. Na Tianwan burst into laughter, fell backwards, rolling all over the floor, and the flowers trembled so disgustingly. The Emperor Bamboo glanced at Tianwan and asked, "Master Qin, what is this?" Qin Pingon suddenly stood up and smiled. "Why are you here? I will follow the fairy soon." The next moment the Emperor Zhu found that on the other side of Tianwan's case, a woman carrying a sword box appeared. She was holding a scabbard and the bottom of her was against the jade card on the case and asked, "How can I break the jar?" She lightly pressed the scabbard and the jade card shattered on the spot. The Emperor Bamboo was horrified in his heart, so he had to roll his sleeves quickly and tried his best to gather the scattered sword intent. He never thought that the woman tapped the case with the scabbard a few times. The complex and intertwined sword intent turned out to be an edict. Completely ignoring the control of the Bamboo Emperor's mind, on the contrary, it was like a monk obeying the patriarch's decree, and it scattered in an instant and the kendos peeled off on their own. The case was like a flower with a clear context. Tianwan immediately got up and said, "I have seen the teacher." Ning Yao nodded slightly and couldn't help saying, "Change face. Take the order." Cui Dongshan immediately used the blindfold technique, turning into the appearance of a boy in white. Tianwan had already been stripped away by his soul. She was equivalent to walking an old road that Cui Dongshan had personally walked back then, and then half of Tianwan's soul was erased by Cui Dongshan. All memories. Among the girlish porcelains, there was a place of water and soil. Nourish one person, grow like a flower. Ning Yao said to Qin Pingon, "You guys continue to talk." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Okay, you can finish the conversation in a few words." Ning Yao went to the railing. Cui Dongshan took his seat again, this time sitting tightly, no more frolicking. The Bamboo Emperor did not move at all, did not even dare to continue to gather the sword intent. The shattered jade tiles in the corner of his eye broke the heart of the sovereign. Fortunately, when he came, his whereabouts were secret, and the observation deck here was isolated from the world, so as not to reveal the meeting between him and Qin Ping. And otherwise, the teacher Xia Yintui saw this scene, and maybe he immediately thought of usurping the throne. Sect masters of Xinjiang Mountain, regardless of their temperament and realm, were able to sit firmly, relying on this jade metal. Qin Pingon sat down again and said with a smile, "Come here and wait for you to find the door. It's just one thing. Let the Emperor Bamboo make a choice." Before drinking tea at the frontline Fingzhou Shirtang, it was for the Emperor Zhu to make a choice between Xinjiang Mountain and Yuan Xinye. Emperor Bamboo said, "Listen with good ears." Qin Pingon said, "You can choose one of the three masters of Xinjiang Mountains: Xia Zongzong, Tao Yanbao, Lu Jimao, Yuan Bai. A former god of wealth who is about to be forced to ban Qiling Mountain for 100 years. A scripture writer Xianxia was born to worship the head of the real world sect, and a sword repairer against Xiefeng who has not been officially removed." The Emperor Bamboo laughed dumbly, not sure. Lu Jimao? The true monarch of Zhejiang from the True Realm sect? Cui Dongshan stretched out his hand and slapped his heart, muttering to himself, "As soon as I heard that the next sect could be created, I, Brother Zifeng, had a happy heart." Insert the novel app I'm using recently. Change source artifact app. Both Android and iPhone support. The Emperor Bamboo turned a deaf ear and said, "Just now the Patriarch's Hall was discussing matters. I have taken away Tao Yanba's financial power. Qiu Lingshan needs to be closed for 100 years. The Emperor Bamboo smiled bitterly. As for Yuan Bai, how would Zhongyue Jin Shanjun be willing to let people go? What's more, Yuan Bai has a firm heart and a very assertive attitude in the world. Since he openly declared to leave Xingyang Mountain, I am afraid it will be difficult to change his mind again." Cui Dongshan tooted, "Oh hello, Sovereign Zhu is really arrogant. Back then he was able to move with affection, no reason, and persuade Yuan Bai to be a foreigner to be a guest of his own. I don't hesitate to violate Jianxin and I have to go to the Yellow River to ask the sword. At this moment I start to talk about Yuan Bai's very opinionated? Or is it that Sect Master Zhu is too old to forget his nature?" Qin Pingon pushed the teacup to Cui Dongshan, smiled and reprimanded, "How do you talk to Sovereign Bamboo?" Cui Dongshan took the teacup with both hands, raised his head and drank it. The Emperor Bamboo had a decision in his heart and asked the last question. "That's it? What else does Lord Qinshan have to order?" Qin Pingon smiled and said, "That's it." The Emperor Bamboo sighed and said, "Thank you. Qinshan has something to say. Speak bluntly and give me a nice word." Qin Pingon said, "It's just that." The Emperor Bamboo shook his head. Obviously unbelieving, he hesitated and raised his sleeves. Just after this action, the handsome young man with a red mole on his eyebrows put his hands on the ground. His face moved back in a panic, shouting, "Be careful!" Mr. Bamboo Emperor turned his face and didn't recognize people, and planned to use a hidden weapon to commit the crime. Otherwise he would learn from that cup and want to order the peaks and the heroes, relying on the large number of people in the crowd, to beat us in his own territory. Qin Pingon said, "Shut up." Cui Dongshan screamed and moved back to his original position. The Emperor Bamboo took out a stack of ancient Buddhist jade albums from his sleeves, and the radiance of the jewels immediately circulated, saying, "This is the apocalypse for the Emperor Bamboo and Luopa Mountain." The jade albums of the 7 paths of Zen come from many ancient mountains in Aquarius. It was originally intended to be refined and used as the foundation stone for the hilltops of many vassals selected by the next sect, the treasure of the mountain, to help condense the luck of the mountains and waters. If it is not enough, I can take Qin Shanju personally to visit the treasure house. Qin Pingon waved his hand, "Forget it." The Emperor Bamboo was silent, just staring at the young sword fairy on the Luopa mountain. He threw himself into the crowd and asked Jianxingyang Mountain. In addition to revenge, Qin Pingon had nothing to ask for. Could it be that the achievement is just a big riot, leaving the entire Aquarius Mountain with a brave and domineering impression? People in the world watching the excitement is not too big a problem, but after watching the excitement, I always like to point fingers and make irresponsible remarks. Qin Pingon stood up with his hands in his sleeves, squinted his eyes and said with a smile, "Just talk about one thing, Qiang Zifeng, you will take care of it in the future. You will never be lucky to climb the mountain. If you are lucky enough to practice, you just rush to the mountain peaks without a name. There is no warm bed, otherwise I will be sent to the foot of the mountain to be the concubine of the General Xiang Gongqing. Of course I am willing to do this," and the two said each has a marriage. "If you don't want to be like this, you Zhengyangshan somehow give them a shaking head and rejection opportunity. Don't worry about being hated by the peak master. Since then, the threshold is everywhere in practice and every day is the year." The Emperor Bamboo stood up, nodded and said, "I will stare at Qiang Zifeng myself in the future. What else? Leng Qi, the master of the peak, she can practice the Taoist with peace of mind in the future. As for all matters of Qiang Zifeng, don't worry about it. As for Yu Feng's master selection, Lu Yu seems good?" Because Lu Xianying asked Jian so many times at the time, he was only kind to her. Lu Yu is now just a bottleneck sword repair in the Longmen realm, not in compliance with the rules. The big deal is to leave the peak owner's position in the air for a few years, and wait for her to enter the Golden Core realm. Lu Ye's cultivating aptitude is actually very good, but compared to Wu Tijing and Yu Lin, she doesn't seem so outstanding. A sword repairer in Jiazi who is expected to be among the Golden Core, being the peak master of Cheongji Peak, is more than enough. Moreover, when Leng Qi was a young lady, she had an unsightly marriage with her uncle Xia Yunsui, so for so many years Qiang Zifeng's sword repaired the line and followed the footsteps of Full Moon Peak everywhere. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "No, in fact you were right before, and there is really nothing to talk about with Xingyang Mountain." The Emperor Bamboo said, "Then I should have settled with Lord Qinshan?" Cui Dongshan rubbed his chin and said with a smile, "It's a pity that the entire Qiangzifeng fairies are still cursing at the moment to bully others, ruining their great career in Xinjiang Mountain and making them all unable to lift their heads. Come." Emperor Bamboo smiled and said, "Your husband will not care about these because what Qin Shanju really cares about is the future Qiangzifeng sisters who dare not shake their heads and say no words. But Qin Shanju can rest assured. The Qiangzifeng atmosphere in the future will not make them so embarrassed." Cui Dongshan exclaimed, "Sure enough, only the enemy is the real confidant. Sect Master Zhu has reached the big jars of the spit stars of the monks of Xinjiang Mountain with a few words." Cui Dongshan stepped out, his figure was radiant, and finally left Tianwan's skin bag in place. The white-clothed boy turned his head, raised 2 fingers pointed at his eyes, and signaled this half-divided woman, "You what I see and think is what I see and think. If you don't believe in evil, we will use your physique as a place to ask questions, and each will show its magic and intrigue." The Emperor Bamboo glanced at the white-clothed boy, and then at the Tianwan who seemed to be restored to her original appearance. Rao is the Emperor of the Bamboo who must be terrified. This boy in white clothes with perverted temperament and absurd words and deeds of course has great skills, but the methods are really dirty. Qin Pingon took a few steps and then stopped suddenly. Bamboo Emperor's heartstrings tightened instantly. Qin Pingon turned his head and said, "Remembering a trivial matter, you have to bother Sect Master Zhu." The Emperor Bamboo said, "But it doesn't matter." Qin Pingon asked, "I don't know how far Xinjiang Mountain is from Luopa Mountain?" The Emperor Bamboo thought for a while and replied, "My cultivator walks in the wind about 200,000 miles away. Why does Lord Qin have this question?" Qin Pingon narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, "Then please ask Sect Master Zhu to erect a monument on the northern boundary of Xinjiang Mountain, and engrave a sentence on it, and head north to Luopa Mountain for 200,000 miles. The Emperor Bamboo's face was uncertain, and even the treasure house of access control could take Qin Pingon to visit, and let Qin Pingon choose the treasures of heaven and earth to take away, but it was a boundary monument that could not cost a few snowflakes. Difficult to climb to the sky. Qin Pingon reminded, "Emperor Bamboo, I'm not discussing things with you." The Emperor Bamboo was silent for a moment, then laughed, nodded and said, "It's a small matter." Qin Pingon removed the obstacles, shrank the mountains and rivers, and traveled north with Ning Yao to chase the dragon boat ferry. Cui Dongshan jumped up to his feet, using the fascinating ladder on the rivers and lakes under the mountain, and while jumping up and down he said with a hippie smile, "Sect Master Bamboo, I didn't get anything. I left empty-handed. You're not allowed to bear grudges. Sister Tian, Qingshan does not change green, the water is flowing, siblings and brothers don't live there." Tianwan, who was temporarily free, sneered, "If you don't pass, it's right for both parties to get along day and night." The white-clothed boy with his big sleeves turned, his figure twisted, turning into a snow. The white rainbow light cuts through the sky, and the ferry travels freely. After the 3 people left, Emperor Bamboo asked softly, "How did you follow his way?" Tianwan no longer had the flattery look she had used to, her eyes staring sharply at the waste of Xinjiang Mountain. Her face was indifferent and her tone was stiff. "Emperor Bamboo, advise you to take care of your mess. Luopa Mountain is not Fenglei Garden, and Qin Pingon is also it's not Li Tuanjing. Don't think the storm has settled. As for me, as long as you know something interesting and don't explore indiscriminately in private, I will still be the female ancestor of Zifeng, and I will not violate the water of the first line of peak wells." The Emperor Bamboo survived a series of great accidents today and didn't care about Tianwan, who had changed his temperament. He smiled and said, "Su Jia, that sword-raising gourd and my close disciple Wu Tijing, anyway you brought it. You have the final say on how to deal with those who go up the mountain." Tianwan said indifferently, "I will immediately restore Su Jia's ancestral identity as Patriarch Hall. She still has the qualifications to continue practicing swords. I will help her secretly. Put the sword-raising gourd into the treasure house, and it still belongs to Xinjiang Mountain in name. It's time to use it, I'll go pick it up. As for Wu Tijing, who has left the mountain, leave it alone. Your fate for master and apprentice is exhausted and you can't force it. If you don't care about him, maybe you can help Xinjiang Mountain. In the future there will be one more Wei and Jin of the Fengxue Temple Xianxia." The Emperor Bamboo asked, "So the 3 things? The espionage of the sect, the report of the landscape and the mirror flower water moon?" Tianwan sneered and said, Naturally, there is Sect Master Lao, please be clever. Actually, the one that the Emperor Bamboo most wants to slap to death is the proud disciple of Shuangfeng Yanchu. Tian turned her head and looked at this triumphant master who was still proud and planning a continent yesterday and said with a sneer, "Is it up to now? I still don't know who the one who asked the sword is?" After taking a seat, Emperor Bamboo stretched out a palm and smiled. "Why don't you sit down and have a tea?" Tianwan directly returned to the Zhiyu Peak where the bird was not standing. The Emperor Zhu laughed at herself and called out the treasurer Ni Yuerong to accompany him to drink tea. Ni Yuerong knelt down on the futon, drinking tea, feeling more uncomfortable than drinking a knife. The Emperor Bamboo suddenly raised a question. Ni Yuerong, if you had a choice back then and no matter how you chose there would be no worries for the future, would you still be that Yanchu's concubine on the mountain? Ni Yuerong's face was pale and colorless, and the Emperor Bamboo leaned forward to help her refill a cup of tea and then said kindly, "Don't be nervous, I just want to hear the truth." With sweat, Ni Yuerong tremblingly said, "I can be seen by Yan Zhonglu." Although she is not named, Ni Yuerong has no complaints. For so many years Yan Zhonglu has helped me Guiyun Tower and Qinggu Peak. The Emperor Bamboo smiled and nodded. It didn't matter what her answer was. What the Emperor Bamboo wanted was just what she wanted, so the Emperor Bamboo asked again, "Do you think Yuan Bai will be the next sect lord and treat us to the sect? Is it a good thing or a bad thing?" Ni Yuerong bite the bullet and said, "Sect master is wise." The Emperor Bamboo smiled and said, "Then let you be the head of the treasury of the next clan, what would you do?" Ni Yuerong's inspiration flashed and said, "I will have nothing to do with Shuilong Peak. From now on I will only have business dealings and no personal friendship." The Emperor Bamboo continued to ask, "If you were on the side of the next sect and you were in control, one day you fell in love with a handsome younger sect who had an eye for him, what would you do? Would you learn from Yanchu? Intimidate him?" Ni Yuerong was struck by lightning. Is this suzerain mad today? Why always ask these inexplicable questions? Ni Yuerong looked embarrassed and said, "If you and I wish, you will become a Taoist companion on the mountain. If the other party already has a heart belonging, the twisted melon is not sweet, so I dare not force it." Of course, Ni Yuerong is very afraid of the suzerain in front of him, but the young sword fairy wearing a lotus crown and a green gauze robe also makes Ni Yuerong's heart lingering. He always feels that the next moment that person will smile as if he was in no one. Appeared at the Xingyang mountain boundary at random and then stood beside him, not saying anything, not knowing what the person was thinking, let alone what he would do next. The Emperor Bamboo sighed, worrying in his heart, not decreasing but increasing. It seems that the most ruthless Wenjian today is not the swordsmanship of Qin Pingon and Lu Xianyang, but the account books that Lu Xianyang took out when he was climbing. It is obvious that those books will only be Qin Ping's handwriting. Because Lu Xianyang looked like a lazy person, he didn't even bother to do it. However, Qin Pingon was young, but the city was extremely deep and he seemed to be the most patient, only to ask Zhang Yangshan for a title of control. Becoming a sword immortal alone is very different from being a suzerain, especially the suzerain of the Kaishan Li Pai faction. On the side of Bailudu, Wei Liang walked alone on the Reed Dang Road. He withdrew his gaze from the side of Guyunla and said with a soft smile, "A soldier's solution is just right." Back to the ferry, Qin Pingon and Yu Yu clasped fists and laughed. Yu Jifeng. Generally, Qin Pingon is not so polite after all, it is an offering to the new appointment. The young mountain master did not call out any guest but worshipped. Yu couldn't help laughing. With the words of the hidden official, Lao Xianxia's hanging heart even fell. Turning around to drink that pulao. Then Qin Pingon said that he wanted to discuss the matter. Millet quickly led the way and chose the largest room on the dragon boat ferry. Qin Pingon sat on the seat by the door at will. Everyone was sitting at will and there was no identity. Humble. Millet grains got busy on their own and put a few melon seeds on everyone's table. After all, there are not many to go out today, so I'm struggling. After Luopashan's right guardian turned around, he found that it was Pei Qian and the big white goose's turn. There were only a few melon seeds in his hand. He scratched his face and returned the same way from the old cook, Chief Shou and Mitsishi. After apologizing respectively, they took back a few in turn and replenished Pei Qian and Big White Goose. Cui Dongshan took the lead and said that our Chief Shou is planning to return to Tongyi's Hao. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "It's just right. You can bring Chao Sunny." If it goes well, we will strive to be in the north of Tonggishao at the end of this year and next spring at the latest. Zone officially established the next clan of Luopa Mountain. Zhang Xianxia smiled and agreed anyway. Qin Pingon continued. If there is no accident when we return to Luopa Mountain, the wind and kite transcontinental ferry of the Xianmi dynasty should also go to Niujiao. Then you will take this ferry to Tongye. Zhou, with this wind and kite ferry, in the future we need to open up a transcontinental route of our own, how to go by land, how to go by sea, how to deal with the passing dynasty in Xianxia, especially with the major crossings on the road. The friendship needs to be carefully weighed and there must be no mistakes. Dongshan and Pei Qian, you are going there to help and you will return to Luopashen in the future. According to the previously established plan, the teacher Miyu Sui right Cui Wei, you need I settled down there and practiced. The teacher helped Chao Sunny to control the general direction. Pei Qian was in charge of walking with the Qinghu Palace and Pushun thatched cottage. Dongshan stared at the golden summit and looked at several hills. As for us, Mi Daijian. At this point Qin Pingon smiled and didn't speak and ate the seeds. Miyu quickly put down the seeds in his hand and straightened his waist. Anyway, I listened to Mr. Zhong's instructions whether to kill someone with a sword or begging for a relationship. Are all responsible. Zhong Qiu smiled and said, don't dare to give orders to me Xishi casually. Yu was puzzled, the hidden official called you a sword immortal or a great sword immortal and I didn't see Miyu getting angry. Yeah, the second seat worship and bullying general worship? Qin Pingon looked towards Hongxiao and said, Sui is not on the boat on the right side. Hongxiao, please turn around and tell her that when you arrive at Tonggishao, she will be responsible for the specific connection between Yuguazong and Yunku Fudi. Hongxiao immediately got up and took his orders. Qin Pingon smiled and said, next time you're still seeing this, don't leave the millet seeds. Hong sat down a little embarrassed. Xiao Mili was sitting on a tall chair swaying her feet, scratching her face. Lord, I will put melon seeds in my pocket next time. Sister Hongxia is so talkative. Although melon seeds are not worth a bit, no one is rare. But if only Sister Hongxia does not have melon seeds on hand, she would have no face. Qin Pingon smiled and said, then you are responsible for reminding Hongxia not to get up and talk next time. When the millet grain heard that there was a position again, he smiled from ear to ear and nodded vigorously. Okay, I will remind my sister Hongxia before every discussion. Miyu squinted at old Jianxian Yu, smiling and saying, Yu Fu, you can knock on melon seeds as soon as you go to the door. It's amazing. In Luopa Mountain this is not everyone's treatment. Yu was stunned, sipping melon seeds in Luopa Mountain. Are there any particular things? Millet grains have arms around the chest and two small brows are frowned. Could it be that the one sack of melon seeds that you buy are actually picking up treasures? In fact, the thieves are precious? Then it is to let the ruler live a long time and formulate a detailed and specific door rules as simple as possible, not too trivial. After discussing the name of the next sect, Qin Pingon asked everyone to think about it. Qin Lingjun said awe-inspiringly, the master's ability to choose a name is the second in the world and no one dares to be the first. The third one should be guilty. Can't wait to claim to be fourth. Cui Dongshan began to throw melon seed shells at Qin Lingjun. You are the strongest, right? As a result, Cui Dongshan was hit by Pei Qian's elbow, and Cui Dongshan glared at the Tsing-Yi boy opposite. Qin Lingjun was furious, reached out his hand to catch the melon seed shell, and threw it back with his backhand. You were beaten by Pei Qian and Guan Laozi was a shit. You were kicked in the bow of the ship before, but I didn't settle accounts with your big white goose. Wei Bo and I, but the brothers are commensurate, the same generation, so where you kick is my butt, is the face of Jun Wei Dashin, okay? Now in front of my lord and your husband, let's go out and make a good move. Qin Pingon ignored their squabbles, was silent for a moment and smiled. I hope we will always be today's Leopashen hope. After the discussion, Qin Pingon only let Cui Dongshan and Jiang Shangzhen stay. Ning Yao sat aside and continued to eat melon seeds. Qin Pingon said, after the natal porcelain was shattered back then, I couldn't piece it together. There were as many as 6 pieces and as few as 4 pieces and they remained outside. Jiang Shangzhen and Cui Dongshan both looked solemn. Ning Yao also put down the seeds in his hand. Qin Pingon smiled and said, the only thing that can be determined now is the Queen Mother Dei. There must be a piece of it. Because I was in the Cloud Tower before and was caught by me. Besides, Zozi might have given Jianxiu Lu Caizhong. One piece Xinghua Lane Moss family may also be hidden. As for the Qianglin sect of Luzhou in Beiju, there may or may not be, I will ask it personally. As for the Lu family of the Yinyang family in the Middle Earth, it's hard to say. Looking at it, all I can think of are these clues. You don't have to be like a big enemy. You have to know that I once broke the Chongqing Bridge and then the Great Wall of Hedao Jianqi. The current physique has turned out to be a good thing, even if the natal porcelain fragments falling into the hands of others in fact has little effect on my practice, and will only give me a chance to follow the vine. Qin Pingon stood up, smiled and said, then take a trip to Dali capital. Sword of Coming Chapter 827. Before going to Dai capital, Qin Pingon took Ning Yao and stood on the bow together and couldn't help asking, will you be annoying if you keep running around with me? Ning Yao glanced at him but said nothing. Things are not annoying, someone is the most annoying. Jiang Shang really stayed in his house. Looking at the mirrors of the fairies, Qin Lingjun took you to learn together. You only felt that the chief show was really rich and the magic weapons used to browse the mirrors were piled up on the table. The landscape paintings were unfolded at the same time, but Chief Show had a pile of small summer money at his hand. Let's talk about it here and talk over there, losing money without stopping, without any chaos. At first glance he was an expert. Cui Dongshan accompanied her husband and talked about the precautions for traveling in the capital of Dali. Seems that the husband is the first time to go there. Cui Dongshan talked about the customs in the capital. The private mansion in the capital city of Dali, there is a Ringyun Iyun building inside, and the ruins of the old Mountain Cliff Academy. You must go to these two places. This time when the Luopa Mountain was visiting Xingyang Mountain, Wei Xian and Lu Baixiang did not show up, because it is not suitable to reveal their identities for the time being. Wei Xian and Chao Jun have been the right arms of the seed brother Lu Xuanmei in the early years. Wei Haoyang, not only with his practical military merits, has won a new martial artist as a captain on the horse a few years ago, and now the commander of the Dali Frontier Army is also an upright and powerful military commander from the 4th rank. He is qualified to lead a battalion of the elite horsemen alone. As for Lu Baixiang, he has a relationship with a Prince Mountain in Zhongyue. The two sides are very close to each other. Maybe one day Lu Baixiang will change and suddenly become a mountain top of the Prince. The chief consecration. Qin Pingon talked about Yanghua, the of water of the Tiefu River, and naturally mentioned the Dragonbeard River, which was so familiar. The Longxi River water god temple in Zixinga made an exception and did not enshrine a golden statue, so the local people in the town today, except for the surnames of Fulu Street and Taoya Lane, do not know the goddess of the river. It is Malanhua. And Malanhua, an old woman, was once a beautiful person in a small town, because she is not only a deceived goddess, a matchmaker, but also a midwife. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, Old man Yang seemed to have promised the river girl. After 30 years, when the old man in the small town knows her face when she was young, almost all have left, then he can make a statue and enjoy the incense. When it comes to natal porcelain, the relationship is complicated. In addition to the Moss House in Xinghua Lane, there are also the owners of the long kiln kilns in the town. In addition, it also involves the relocation of the Ping Tiao from Luopa Mountain to Chiduan Mountain and the reconstruction of the mountain gods. Song Yuzhang, the former superintendent of the temple. Lin Shiyi's father, the assistant official of the Kiln Affairs Superintendent's Construction Bureau, was a man who had gone to the officialdom of the capital city and was still invisible. He once assisted several long kiln superintendents. There is also the Qin Tianjian in Dali capital, as well as a prospective warrior and earth teacher, and a small group of navy masters, who were responsible for the secret firing of the small town's natal porcelain. It was Ma Kuxuan's father who revealed the inside story of the porcelain, but the Ma family in Xinghua Lane will definitely not be the real master behind the scenes. Compared with a Wenjian Xingyang Mountain, it is just walking along the river against the trend. In fact, the context and route are extremely simple and there is no diversion at all. However, the matter of natal porcelain is a multitude of things, a mess just like size. Rivers, streams and lakes are densely networked and intricate. It's just that the situation is complicated, and Qin Pingon didn't find it difficult. Cui Dongshan asked, Sir, let's fall in love with the mountain. Next, are we going to open the door and collect disciples? Or will we talk later and continue to maintain the half-closed and half-closed state? Qin Pingon had long thought about this and did not hesitate to say, choose the latter. At least within 30 years, Unless one of you is interested in someone's qualifications, each of you will receive it as a successor. Otherwise Luopishan will not charge anything. A cultivator who took the initiative to visit, no matter how good his aptitude, would not be accepted. Cui Dongshan lay on the railing with his legs hanging off the ground and said, "We are making trouble in Xingyang Mountain. Someone will definitely come after hearing the news." Preceding disciple. Including me Xianxian, who is not the best preaching teacher on the mountain, all of them are thighs, just hug one. It is a great immortal fate that can be envied by the dead. In fact, as long as it is the family of Zhongzong, there is no shortage of monastic embryos who take the initiative to visit the house and visit the immortals. Qin Pingon whispered, "If you are willing to wait, let them wait in Longzhou just to see how their own temperaments are. If you don't want to wait, they will go back to their respective homes. Worry is not a genealogy god. The matter of collecting disciples and incorporating them into the genealogy, the immortal family on the mountain is roughly just a few paths. The dynasty and country where the mountain is located helps select the embryonic monks in the country and send them to the mountain for practice. Either it's because of chance there is no teacher's biography, or by chance accidentally hitting and embarking on the path of spiritual practice, or being the bumpy mountain and wild repairs, or being cautious going to those big immortals' houses and bumping luck. Within each sect, there will also be a group of genealogical monks who are good at inquiring the roots and looking at the air. Every few decades they will receive an errand from the patriarch hall, ranging from several years to long. For more than 10 years or even decades he has been sneaking under the mountain all year round, looking for good materials and beautiful jade for his martial arts. Tianwan from Xingyang Mountain often does this kind of thing. Furthermore, the immortal masters journey down the mountain and on the way to experience, go with the fate and do it easily. A master chooses his apprentice and the apprentice also chooses the master. Such mountain masters often have the most reliable relationship and go longer. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "On the side of Lotus Root Land, if you let Changming stare at you, you won't be able to make any big mistakes. You don't need to be too distracted by this matter. This is the advantage of sitting on a piece of blessed land. The monks who get the moon near the water tower and go up the mountain on their own, the pure martial arts who rise in the rivers and lakes and the battlefields, and the ghosts and heroes who are expected to build an obscene temple, waiting for the orthodox edict from the imperial court. You can be promoted to the gods of mountains and waters, and you can protect the side with the right words. There will be genealogical immortals, mountains and wild repairs, ghosts and spirits, various city temples, day mountain gods, big rivers, river gods, lakes, rivers, land and land. Mother. As long as the aura of heaven and earth becomes more and more abundant, and then there are various landscape gods who perform their duties to stabilize the luck, then the circulation of a blessed land will be more flawless. Blessed land master, no matter how much fairy money and magic weapons are thrown into it, the fertilizer will still not flow into outsiders' fields." Qin Pingon whispered, "Although it is a blessed land of our own, we cannot be regarded as a cropland that must be planted in spring and harvested in autumn. After one crop is cut this year, we will wait for the next crop next year." Cui Dongshan nodded and said, "Work hard and harvest carefully. Let everyone have a choice." In fact, this is where the most basic style of Luopa Mountain lies. This unwritten rule that does not need to fall on paper will be the biggest ancestor of Luopa Mountain in the future. Qin Lingjun and Qin Wanshu, who followed their husbands into the mountains first, and the four in the picture scroll, and then to Shi Rou Tui Wei Miu Hongxia Pei Xiang. Everyone is like this. It's not because Zhu Lian, the masters, and Pei Qian Chao Sunny all come from the blessed land, so they must take care of their moods. But the reason why Luopa Mountain is Luopa Mountain lies in these, have always been so, but not so. In terms of size. Within a blessed land, all the spiritual beings on the landscape of mountains and rivers have choices. In fact, it means that Luopu Mountain has, to a large extent, lost the identity of God. Cui Dongshan said, "Sir, but this is a great risk. Jiang Shangzhen's Cloud Cave blessed land, the An incident in the early years, the corpses were all over the mountains and the mountains, which is a lesson from the past. We need to take a warning." Qin Pingon nodded and said, "Of course. There is no one in the world that has gone to extremes and can bring good things. That's why I let the teacher go back to the blessed land from time to time, pay attention to the mountains, and then there are Hongxia and Peixiang. An outsider in the blessed land helping to watch the trend on the mountain over there, and finally after I finish the next case, I will choose a place in the blessed land as a place for cultivating." Every 100 years I spend a few years in it. Traveling everywhere. In short, I will never let the lotus root repeat the mistakes of the cloud cave blessed land. Cui Dongshan nodded and said, Mr. has this plan, I'm relieved. Jiang Shangzhen used to deliberately let it go. He felt that a cloud cave blessed land had been in his hands for many years. After hundreds of years of peace and quiet, the rules and frameworks have been established. Blessed land is like a strong young man. Let it go for 100 years and see if there is a genius in the cultivation of Taoism, and flying with the ability. After Jiang Shangzhen went to visit Beiju Luzhou. As a result, within the cloud cave blessed land, there was a close and interlocking chain, coupled with the instigation, funding and support of the conspirators behind the scenes, covering most of the native hills of the Immortal family in the Blessed Land, plus dynasties, vassals and mountains. Thousands of gas trainers, horseshoes under the mountain, iron armor clenched, mountains and rivers discolored, cloud cave blessed land. Only the children of the Jiang family were killed in just 3 days, as many as hundreds of people. In the end, as long as the surname is Jiang, he would rather kill by mistake. Jiang Shangzhen, many friends from the rivers and lakes and mountain friends he met when he was young. Either he personally sent to Fudi to provide for the elderly, or was a fairy teacher who helped to repair the Fudi ferry, and they were almost dead. If it were replaced by Luopa Mountain, it would be like being in a blessed place with that kind of master, small warm trees, Xianxia, etc., and then just because one of the young mountain owners is not careful, they all become old people one by one. Story. So no matter what dangers he encountered in his previous life, no matter what life and death enemies he encountered, Jiang Shangzhen had almost never had the slightest stern look on his face. Only that time was a grinning man who led people to open the gate of blessed land. After that event that was a catastrophe for the Jiang family to the Yunku blessed land, Jiang Shangzhen was actually tantamount to completely losing the battle for the next sovereign of Yuquzhong. Because of Jianxia Wei Ying, at that time Sun Yuan arranged to go to Jui Peak. Before that, even Wei Ying himself, who was extremely energetic, didn't think he had the ability to compete with his predecessor Jiang Shangzhen. Once he had a great battle with Jiang Shangzhen, Wei Ying believed that he had no chance of winning. Once he was targeted by Jiang Shangzhen, there is only one end, either death or death is better than life. After all, Yuquzhong is the most distinguished and upright sect in the continent, and Jiang Shangzhen's methods of rectifying the blessed land are too cruel and violent. Sun Yuan privately called Jiang Shangzhen outside the ancestral hall and asked him 3 questions in succession. After that, he didn't regret it. Do you want to accept it? And do you want to die in the Patriarch Hall? Jiang Shangzhen said he had no regrets. No one in the blessed land of the cloud cave can kill, of course you can stop. As for the old in the Patriarch Hall, since they can't be beaten for the time being, then consider the long-term plan and talk about it later. Nourish. Cui Dongshan once chatted with Jiang Shangzhen about the past, and smiled and asked Chief Shou what he thought of the past when he looked back. Jiang Shangzhen was drinking wine at the time, but he just said with a smile, I am stupid and can't blame others, stupid enough to be an enemy of me, and don't have the ability to escape my life. Of course don't blame me if you die. Cui Dongshan finally asked with a smile, Chief Shou, you are so diligent in helping us lotus roots. Is it because you have a stomach of bad water waiting for a good show, right? Jiang Shang really cursed. The last 2 very smart people just drank silently. People like them don't really need wine and food to drink. For example, the old and Yugui's ancestor hall were actually dead during that battle. So there is no need for Jiang Shangzhen to settle accounts and take revenge. Regardless of the mountains, good people and bad people, good and evil people, men and women in adulthood, who doesn't have a few jars of sad wine that is deeply buried in the heart? It's just that some have forgotten where they are and some are afraid to open it. On the road of life, every time I dare to be angry but dare not speak, but also to bow my head to make a smile with others, it may be a jar of bitter wine, probably too much bitter wine, and finally teach people to be dull and silent, one after another, is a sea of suffering. Cui Dongshan looked into the distance with soft eyebrows. Mr. Hope that Luopa Mountain will always be today's Luopa Mountain, and I hope Mr. Luo will always be tomorrow's Mr. Qin Pingon smiled and said, why isn't it the husband today? Cui Dongshan leaned on the railing, smiled and murmured, students believe that every husband of tomorrow will be better than every today. Qin Pingon reached out and held down the white-clothed boy's head, then raised his palms, bent his fingers and slammed a chestnut down. You also said that the atmosphere of the Luopa Mountain is not your crookedness? In the distance, the millet grain pulled Pei Qian's sleeve, reached out his hand to block his mouth and secretly smiled. Pei Qian, take a look, the big white goose must have said the wrong thing again. Pei Qian smiled and said, don't call the big white goose, the younger brother likes bookkeeping the most. Xiaomili laughed and said, if you are shouting, you will call the little brother if you have anything, and the big white goose if there is nothing. Pei Qian blinked. What are you talking about? Who taught you? No one taught you. You must be self-taught, right? Xiaomili said in surprise. Huh. His eyes motioned to Pei Qian and gave a hint so I could answer this difficult question. Pei Qian raised his arm, bent his fingers into a chestnut shape, twisted his wrist lightly and sighed. Xiaomili got it and immediately shouted, I'm going to get acquainted by myself, learn by myself, no one teaches me. Cui Dongshan turned his head and smiled. Xiaomili coughed, turned around, winked at the big white goose and glanced at Pei Qian diagonally. Cui Dongshan yelled, Sister, the right guardian seems to be suggesting something to me. The millet grains hurriedly stopped between Pei Qian and de Baigo, jumped up, waved vigorously to block Pei Qian's sight and shouted, Pei Qian, what a good deal. Big Baigo is trying to provoke a dilemma. As a result, Cui Dongshan suffered from Qin Pingon and 1 chestnut, and the millet grains suffered from Pei Qian and 1 chestnut. Both sides did not make a profit. Cui Dongshan hugged his head, turned his head and smiled. Sir, in order to save money, the ferry can only go back home so slowly. Mr. is busy in advance. It is better to go to the capital faster than Yufeng. Qin Pingon nodded, feeling feasible. The Luapa Mountain front line upholds the tradition of diligence, thrift and family management. So after that I took Ning Yao and left the dragon boat ferry travel with Yufeng together. Millet grains hugged the railing and rubbed his arms with his cheeks, and the good man Shanju was busy again. Cui Dongshan sat on the railing, moving his hips little by little. Millet, are we chatting? Xiaomili was busy thinking about things and she complained about de Baigo's injustice, and deliberately didn't go to see Cui Dongshan. She just smiled and said, Who are you? De Baigo I know is generous, little brother is amazing, someone is a little bit, it's not like him. A melon seed is so small and not like him. Cui Dongshan leaned back, turned upside down, fell to the ground and hugged the railing with the millet grains. Pei Qian hesitated for a while and asked some things about the Queen Mother. Back then, Pei Qian had heard of it when he was on the battlefield with the capital. Cui Dongshan smiled and said that there is nothing to talk about, just a woman who clings to an acre of land and scratches whoever he sees. Xiaomili is not interested in these and I can't remember it. Before, when Pei Qian was only a little taller than himself, it was fun to patrol the bandits together every day. Go and ask the old cook for a few pieces of cloth, learn from the heroine costume in the romance novel. Let Sister Nwanshu help cut into a cloak, one holding a green bamboo stick, the other holding a golden pole, all the way through the Wuthering Mountains forest, as long as they run fast enough for the cloak to fly. Every time there is heavy snow in the Luapa Mountain, Pei Qian makes her stand still and become a big snowman. Sister Nwanshu either waits under the eaves with a charcoal cage, or prepares the stove in the house. She is big water monster. There was another time Pei Qian pulled her and the two hid in the corner. They had made an appointment in advance to let the old cook learn about the most powerful hidden weapon in the world. In the end she stood still, nodded. Pei Qian stretched out her hands, slapped her, grabbed her face, then staggered, spinning one by one, turning to the middle of the road just to throw her out. The old cook, she had some real skills and she barely blocked her. After she was placed on the ground, the old cook was still frightened. He kept moving back, punching out his hands indiscriminately and finally stood still. It was hard to see the truth, old cook. The old face blushed and said angrily about this kind of hidden weapon. I traveled all over the rivers and lakes and rummaged through the novels. It was still unheard of. I was caught off guard and I was really caught off guard. Whenever there is a thunderstorm they stand side by side on the second floor of the bamboo building. I don't know why, Pei Qian is very powerful. Every time I hold a trekking pole I just need to move towards the rain screen, and then there will be lightning and thunder. Every time she asks Pei Qian how to do it, Pei Qian said, millet grains, you can't learn how to do it. The master at that time caught my martial arts aptitude. When Pei Qian grows up the two of them will not be so troubled. Pei Qian also said that since Qin Lingjun entered the nascent soul realm, he has been deliberately holding his body unchanged. Otherwise he would be at least a young monk who looks like a monk. If he wants to, he can become a vulgar son of Yamashita about his age. The millet grains just ask why, is it okay to grow up without spending money? Pei Qian smiled and said that he was waiting for Sister Nwanshu. Xiaomili immediately understood. Jing Qing turned out to like Sister Nuanshu. Pei Qian reminded her that if you know about it, don't ask Sister Nuanshu or Qin Lingjun. She put her fingers together and wiped her lips, understand. Pei Qian also said that when you patrol the mountain alone in the future, if you encountered Sun Yuanji walking on the steps to practice boxing, you can keep walking but don't forget to say hello to Sun Yuanji, regardless of whether the other party agrees or not. You can do it as a subject, it doesn't matter which time you forget it, just fill it up next time. Xiao Mili thought it was not difficult but asked Pei Qian why. Pei Qian smiled and said that in the eyes of Master, Sister Tsun is a real pure martial artist. When he heard this, Xiao Mili nodded and was sad and Pei Qian stopped calling that nickname. Fortunately, Pei Qian quickly added, you will call her Sister Tsun in person from now on, and we will continue to call her Tsun Henin from behind. Pei Qian saw that the millet grains had been in a daze and couldn't help asking, what are you thinking about, something on your mind? The millet grains let go and when it fell on the ground he nodded vigorously, stretched out his palm and then made a fist, such a big deal. Then spread her hand again and the millet grain smiled and said, swish, it's all right. Amidst the sea of clouds, 2 strokes of body shape, passing by in a flash, if overlooking the mountains and rivers, winding like silk threads. In Ning Yao's field of vision, Qin Pingon seemed to be practicing a superior escape method. His figure turned into dozens of sword lights and then scattered, but when he was finally forced to reconsolidate his figure, he would be swayed and drawn again. Skimming to Ning Yao's side, repeating the cycle, never get tired of it. Ning Yao only then remembered that Qin Pingon, who likes to learn everything, seems to have not studied the life-saving escape technique very much. This is actually not common among the mountain masters. Ning Yao was okay when she was idle anyway, just a little bit of heart. After watching him a few times she turned her mind, her figure quietly scattered with 18 sword lights, and finally she gathered her figure in the sea of clouds dozens of miles away. Yao stepped on the cloud to hover, quietly waiting for the guy behind him. Qin Pingon followed Ning Yao and after that he stopped practicing this technique. Soon the 2 Yufeng passed by a fairy family school, with towering green ridges, glorious ancient pavilions, and dangerously constructed buildings to view the mansions. They rise on the mountain with waterfalls in the mountains and red lacquer books on the cliffs, and there is just a group of fairies in colorful clothes. The hand-held flower basket as if to go somewhere to pick flowers and make incense. Ying and Yan laughed and saw 2 shocked figures of imperial wind. They immediately stopped talking and cast their words to the strange man and woman. To curiously look, could it be a pair of road couples on the mountain traveling? Ning Yao asked Qin Pingon if he knew what sect it was. Qin Pingon told the historical origins of this little sect. Ning Yao lifted his chin and asked if he knew anyone and whether he needed to say hello. Qin Pingon smiled and said that there was no need, but he had heard of it and was not familiar with it. Wait until they recognized the face of the man who was passing by. Suddenly, a woman screamed out an exclamation first. She was so excited that she hurriedly told her fellow teachers and sisters that it was the sword fairy in Qingshan, the one from Luopa Mountain. It turned out that in the previous Xinjiang Mountain Wenjian, this monk of the Xianxia sect had also seen half of the excitement with Jinghua Shuiyue. Qin Pingyuan did not recognize them but they did recognize Qin Pingyuan. On the other side of the mountain facing Jinghua Shuiyue, they were still chattering about the content of the quarrel. They were very women. Some people felt that the legend of Longquan sword sect named Lu Xianyang might have better swordsmanship, but the appearance is not as good as the Luopa. The Lord Qinshan. Later someone learned that Luopa Mountain was near Piyun Mountain, and they had already made an appointment with the same door. Next time I went to the northern Dali to experience, I must go and take a look at the nearby sword fairy. I never thought I would go out today. I saw the wind passing by the young sword fairy. It is a pity that Qin Shanju is surrounded by a woman who looks good. Maybe it is the disciple of this sword fairy. The same monk Yufeng whose speed is different from that of cloud and mud, had already left those women behind him. Looking at Qin Pingan's helpless expression, Ning Yao couldn't help but smile and said, "You don't need to be like this on purpose. I actually don't care at all." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "I know. But in fact don't try it like this." Ning Yao does not care. It is one thing, whether he cares is definitely another thing. The reason why she doesn't care is that she cares every time things are in order. Qin Pingan is applying his own husband's order theory and applying what he has learned. After Lu Xianyang left the first line peak, he met with Dong Gu in a mountain temple on the outskirts of Shaoguo in the north. Xia Ling smiled and said, I just got a letter from Master Fei Jian. Let us hurry back. Master is in Xianxia Mountain, waiting for us. Lu Xianying was a little surprised, but Wan Taijiang has not returned to Xianxia Mountain for many years. Why, this boring gourd secretly looked at the mirrored flowers, and felt that the master's sword skills were not as good as his disciples. He lost face and was annoyed that he had to treat his own family law. Served. After the Dali Song family allocated the vast territory of the old Zhongyue to the Longquan Jianzong, they successively moved their family business to the north. First Su Xiaoqiao, where Xieling was responsible for the construction of the mansion and the repair of the Taoist temple. With the help of Daxing civil engineering, he also needed to work with the Beiyue prince and mountain to stabilize the routes and water transport. Later Wan Qiong also opened the furnace and cast swords there. Donggu, the big disciple of the original Kaifeng mansion on Hengqi Peak, took 10 several sword sect disciples left the mountain on the west side of Longjis jurisdiction and went to Jianzong's new site to practice swords together, so that in the end only Lu Xianying was left alone, guarding the blacksmith shop by the Longxi River. At present the 4 oldest protagonists of the Longquan sword sect, except for Lu Xianying who is already a sword repairer in the Yupu realm, the senior brother Donggu is a qi practitioner in the Yuanying realm, Su Xiaoqiao is a sword repairer in the Jindan realm, and Xieling is a master of Yuanying. Jing Jianxiu is a hidden formation master and is proficient in alchemy. It's no wonder that Wan Qiong is not in a hurry about receiving the prose and retransmitting it. He is even willing to make wedding clothes for others. Sending Yulu and Luyu, the embryos of sword fairies that can open up the peak, down the mountain is like giving away to others for nothing. Several Jindan Dixian. Wan Qiong accepts disciples always like this. If you say that before, there are people who think that the two sects are also based on swords. Zhengyangshan Jingyang Jianzong Longquan Jianzong. After Lu Xianying asks the sword, no one thinks that Longquan Jianzong can only be supported by Xieling empty shelf. The Jade Purity Realm sword repair before the age of 50, let alone Aquarius, is one of the few existences left on any continent in the Hauran world. Mizu was also there. She just stood there. Even if she didn't speak, she was pleasing to the eye. The flowers were beautiful and the moon was reunited. Here the mountain stood far away at the entrance of the temple and saw the great Lu Jianxian who came by. The mountain bowed his head and bowed his waist with a bright smile. He didn't take the initiative to say hello. He didn't dare to disturb the young sword who was fighting bullfight in Jingyang Mountain. Lu Xianying clasped his fist high and said, I have disturbed the master of the mountain to clean up. The mountain hurriedly clasped his fists and said, if there are immortals, spirits, little gods are very lucky. Lu Xianying ran to rub his shoulders for the senior brother Donggu and said with a smile, Brother Dong and senior sister Su, after seeing master, you must speak for me. I will be a guest on Jingyang Mountain this time. The injury was serious, and if we tried our best to let us Longquan Jianzong show up, if the master would have to curse people, he would be too unconscionable, and would not teach the morality of the teacher. I would be depressed by the time and hurt the root of the Dao Dao. Master would not cry afterwards. Donggu smiled and nodded, no problem. Actually, master doesn't like Xingyang Mountain. It's not a year or two. Su Xiaoqiao is a stubborn temperament with no sense of human affection. I can persuade a few words, but in the end it is the master who makes the decision. Lu Xianying turned his head and smiled and asked, Miss Yu, I'm asking Jen this time, is it okay? Credit Yaya nodded and said, it's a good deal. Lu Xianying was dumb. Xieling can't help being laughed. One thing drops one thing. Thinking of something, Xieling said suddenly, I remember that master said in person that as long as anyone is in the Jade Pure Realm sword repair, whoever can be the next sect master. Lu Xianying frowned and said, why don't I know? Donggu nodded, master did say this, but at that time junior brother Lu was still studying in Nanpasuzhou. Lu Xianying doubted, Xieling, are you sneaking into the Jade Pu Realm sword fairy? Xieling shook his head and said, no, the bottleneck of Yuanying is difficult to break, and it will take at least 10 years of hard work. Lu Xianying rubbed his chin, sure enough I still have to rely on me. How much high incense Wan Tai Smith burned to receive such a proud disciple as I am. Lu Xianying was silent for a moment and said to himself, if master returns to Xiushan this time and intends to tell us about it, then I'll have to take up the burden. Chen Pingon, that kid is the sovereign, he has no reason. Asked Yaya. On the top of the sword, how much wine did you drink? Lu Xianying rolled his eyes and said, Donggu was relieved that Lu Xianying took the initiative to request his successor. Su Xiaoqiao was convinced and Xieling didn't care at all. He just thought it was a good thing. Except for Lu Xianying, Xieling really didn't think that the brothers and sisters could serve as the second lord of Longquan Sword Sect. These two brothers and sisters, no matter who will be the supreme master, are difficult to convince the public and there will be great hidden dangers. But if the patient and excellent brother Donggu is responsible for the operation of the treasury, the temperamental senior sister Su Xiaoqiao will be the master. Laws are all good choices and master can cast swords with peace of mind. As for myself, I am more able to devote myself to practice, climb higher step by step and prove immortality and finally. Thinking of this, Xieling raised his head and looked towards the sky. Soaring. Reach the sky. If you only talk about skins, immortality and Longquan Jianzong, you still have to look at the Yulan Tingji from the Xie family in Taoya Lane. Xie asked in his heart. Why are you willing to be the suzerain? In her opinion, Lu Xianying is actually Lu Xianying smiled and said, Master Wan is a good person and Qin Pingon is also a good person. Xie was confused and didn't understand that his master and friend were two good people. What did this have to do with Lu Xianying's disobedience as the sovereign? Lu Xianying said, if I really become the sect master, it is actually just a transition. Master Wan is not here and I am absent-minded. Therefore it is the future third sect master who really leads Longquan Jianzong to ascend. And who is it? It's not easy to say for now, just wait. Hurry up and return to Daolongzu. On the side of Xianxia Mountain, Wan Qiong stood alone by the cliff, silently watching the scenery of the mountains. In the old days, the western mountains in the Lizhu Cave, including the Beiwepiun Mountain, total 62. The ranks of the mountains are very different. The big hills are comparable to the mountains in the small country, and the small hills are for a golden pill. Dixian's secluded residence practice will be a little shabby and lack aura, so you must spend money from the gods to not delay your practice. There is a place in the world for cultivating Taoism, where there is a lot of spiritual energy in the world, and the depth of Taoism in the mountains. In the final analysis, it is the essence of Taoism that has how many grains of rain money. Two major sects, of which Luopa Mountain, which has the most subordinate hills under its jurisdiction, is already the most. Huimeng Mountain, Baijiantai, Niujiao Mountain and Gilbak Wei Xiaofeng Reading Post. The young mountain owner, in less than 30 years, has gradually owned nearly 20 mountain heads. If no matter the number, only the mountains and rivers are covered and the big mountain Piun Mountain is aside. Since Luopa Mountain, Huimeng Mountain and Huanghu Mountain are all huge hills, in fact, Luopa Mountain already encompasses half of the western mountains. The sage Wan Qiong's Longquan Sword Sect, in addition to the earliest ancestral mountain Xianxia Mountain, and Tiaoding Mountain and Hengcha Peak, each other has the potential to fight each other, plus the Kaiyunfeng Xianchao Mountain and Baolu Mountain leased from Luopa Mountain. Formed a piece of the hinterland of the sect, and then a group of hills were collected in the bag, forming a circle of sword sect outer forces, but compared to the Luopu Mountain, the number of people in the Longquan Sword Sect was always small. On the contrary, it seemed to be occupied by the latecomers of Luopa Mountain, and the Jianzong opened up a new place, and the progeny followed the move to the north, and finally formed a pattern in which Luopa Mountain was the only one. In fact, Wan Qiong once wanted to take roots here to receive the inheritance to receive and then to pass on each other and then spread the branches and leaves and finally in his hands, carry forward a sect, and as a gift from the Dali court Wan Qiong originally intended to be the site of the next sect of the Longquan Jianzong on the site to the north of you, but only to come and go, it turned into an unconventional big vassal Xiaozu Mountain. On the border line of the mountains and rivers of Longzhou, the sword light flashed and the wind galloped around the mountains, following a predetermined route and finally flew to Xianxia Mountain. Wan Qiong raised his hand to catch the hand of Xieling sent back. Letters to Fujian. A few progeny are about to enter the borders of Huangting country. The letter said that Miss Yu would also eat rice. At first glance, it was Lu Xianying's tone. Wan Qiong put away the Fujian, began to cook, made a table of food by himself, and sat down as the owner of the house. I patiently waited for a few descendants and a guest to come to this ancestral mountain for a meal. Xie Yu wanted to return to the blacksmith's shop alone, but Lu Xianying did not agree. He said in the letter that he had told master that you would be there. If you go back temporarily, you will not give face to Taijiang. In this area of Longzhou, Taijiang and Taijiang Wei are both responsible. Handle these two are very good talkers most of the time, but occasionally they have small belly. When he arrived at the house, Wan Qiong, who was usually not smirking with anyone, still had a little smile on Xiaoyu, called Miss Yu, and made a rare joke saying that he was not an outsider, so you are welcome. If the food is not right, just say it. But Lu Xianying was so happy. Wan Taijiang still knows how to behave. He sat on a bench with Yaya. Donggu and Su Xiaoqiao, who were sitting across from their desks, sat in dignity. Xieling was more casual, sitting back to the door. On the bench, Lu Xianying helped everyone to serve the rice one by one. After taking a seat on the moon, he looked at a table of meals. There were meat and vegetable dishes with good color and fragrance. Unfortunately, there was no big pot of dried bamboo shoots and old duck pot. After Wan Qiong took the job from Lu Xianying, he did not pick up the chopsticks. Lu Xianying had already started to devour him and was elbow for a month. Lu Xianying's cheeks bulged, raised his head, and saw that everyone hadn't moved his chopsticks. Wan Qiong said, "It's okay, eat yours." Lu Xianying was about to nod, but the instep under the table was stepped on again, and he had to put down his chopsticks. Wan Qiong said, "I plan to let Lu Xianying take over as the overlord. Donggu, you guys, if anyone has any comments, you can talk about it." Longquan Jinzong has always been like this. There has never been any discussion in the Patriarch's hall, and some important matters are discussed at the dinner table. Donggu said, "Pastor, I have no opinion on this. Xianyang is the next lord, it is best." Su Xiaoqiao said, "Master, my disciples have no objection." Xieling smiled and said, "Junior brother Lu is expected to succeed as sovereign." Lu Xianying complained, "If you still call junior brother Lu, you have to call the lord." Wan Qiong turned his head and looked around. Lu Xianying quickly picked up a chopsticks dish for Master. Master's cooking skill clearly uses sword-making skills and is perfect. Xiaoyu understands a little bit why Lu Xianying, who is not stingy, can be so popular, because this military strategist Wan Xingren is relatively old-fashioned, and his eldest disciple Donggu has a way of learning. He respects his teacher so much that he is too formal. Words, Xieling is too immortal, far away from the world, especially not fond of general affairs. If there is no Lu Xianying, it is estimated that every meal will be dull and silent and will leave after eating. Wan Qiong continued, "Donggu will manage the revenue and expenditure of the treasury from now on, and Su Xiaoqiao will be responsible for the rules and regulations of the Patriarch Hall. Xieling will practice well. If you are willing to be distracted, you can accept more direct disciples. There are indeed fewer disciples on the mountain. Sibit. As for how to deal with the Dei court and the monks on the mountain in the future, you guys will discuss it by yourself, and it's not that Lu Xianying has become the sect master, so he must take the responsibility." In a few words, Wan Qiong finished a series of sect events. Wan Qiong picked up his chopsticks and said, "Eat. Give an order, eat and eat." Except for Lu Xianying's gag, there was no other words at the dinner table. Yue only admires Lu Xianying's point. No matter what he says or does, he is never embarrassed. Wan Qiong was the first to finish eating, put down his chopsticks, and before he got up he said, "Xianying, you are the suzerain from today, so you don't need to say hello to me on everything. I will only take care of the sword." Looking at the other three survivors again, Wan Qiong said calmly, "No matter what position you hold in the same sect must look like the same sect, and there are some smoky habits outside, so don't bring it up the mountain in the future." After saying this, Wan Qiong walked out of the house and Yufeng left. As soon as Wan Qiong left, Donggu and Su Xiaoqiao had some words. Instead, it was Lu Xianying's turn to chew slowly and stop talking. After a meal, Su Xiaoqiao is responsible for cleaning up the dishes and helping with Yaya. Su Xiaoqiao has a very good impression of this girl. Like an uncle, Lu Xianying, with Erlang's legs and toothpicks in his mouth, waited until the two ladies went to the stove, tapped their fingers on the tabletop and said earnestly, "Old Dong Xiaoxia, you two are both young. When I'm young, I can find my daughter-in-law, otherwise I, the sect master, will be guilty of a bunch of bachelors every day and I feel uncomfortable." Xieling smiled and said, "Senior brother Dong, I knew someone had become the sovereign just like this. You still don't fight for the position of sovereign? Otherwise, let's change our minds and go to the master to beg? I'm responsible for helping to convince Sister Su. You are responsible for stalking the master, and changing the lord at that time will be a meal anyway." Donggu nodded and said, "I feel a little irritating in my heart." Lu Xianying chuckled, "Just with you two want to make trouble on Wan Tijiang's side?" Lu Xianying stretched out a palm and wiped his temples. "Furthermore, I will tell you a secret. The look in my eyes by senior sister Su is long gone. Su Xiaoqiao was at the stove and was inexplicably suffered from this unwarranted disaster. He became angry and said, Lu Xianying, are you looking for death? No matter how bad your mouth is, you like to talk nonsense and you have to have a degree. Believe it or not, I tore your mouth? Lu Xianying said with an innocent look. I mean, sister, you look at the eyes of the younger brother, just like a sister treats a younger brother who has separated and reunited. It is so kind and gentle it makes my heart warm, and it is wrong. Credit Ye pulled Su Xiaoqiao's sleeve and whispered softly, don't pay attention to him. He dreams every day and he can't figure it out. Su Xiaoqiao laughed angrily. If you don't have a general knowledge of him, you will have to take care of Lu Xianying in the future, so that you don't have to worry about him every day, and he is mad and foolish. Credit month is a little depressed. This girl, why can't she talk so much? She's not bad, but she's a little bit insecure. Lu Xianying got up and said, I have to go to Piyun Mountain and talk about things as the suzerain. You are all busy. Patted Xia Ling on the shoulder. Xiaoxia, practice hard, guard against arrogance and rashness. Xia Ling smiled and clasped his fists. Listen to the Lord. Lu Xianying felt that it was not too enjoyable, so he was going to pat the big brother on the shoulder and teach a few words. Donggu waved his hand. Don't come to this set. Lu Xianying smiled and walked out of the house and asked, Miss Yu, let's go down the mountain together? Qin Yu shook her head. No, I have to go back to the shop. Lu Xianying went to Piyun Mountain alone and talked to Wei Bo. Wei Bo was stunned, and it was of great importance. He neither shook his head nor nodded and asked, This is what Saint Ruan meant? Lu Xianying patted his chest and laughed. Mr. Wei Dashan, leave it alone. Anyway, now Longquan Jianzong, I Lu Xianying have the final say. Wei Mo asked in doubt, how to say? Lu Xianying laughed loudly and said, I am already the new sect master. Isn't I the final say? Wei Bo was silent for a moment. Lu Xianying suppressed his smile and nodded. Wei Bo sighed and smiled and said, Understood, do it now. At the court of Dali I will help explain. Lu Xianying said with emotion. Friends like Wei Shanjun are hard to find with a lantern. On this day Longquan Jianzong was in the mountains to the west. Except for the 3 hills rented from Luopa Mountain, they remained in place. The rest of the Xianxia Mountains, including the mountain Weibo, were summoned by the monarch of Beiyue Mountain. Joined forces to display their magical powers and moved to the old Zhongyue land boundary. From now on there will be no Longquan sword sect in the old Lizhu cave, and there will only be a Luopa Mountain with the prefix Song. When Wei Bo was busy, Lu Xianying had been squatting on the top of Piyun Mountain, holding the grass roots in his sleeves with both hands. In fact, this is what Master Wan Qiong meant, but I can't say it. Sword Qi Great Wall. Confucian shirts are left and right, sitting cross-legged with horizontal sword on knees, looking forward. Chao Jun, who came here all the way across the sea, sat down not far away, panting for breath, and after his breath became calm, he smiled and turned his head to say hello. Mr. Zhua. Gently nod left and right. Chao Jun waited for a long time and found that there was no meaning to speak on the left and right, so he had to bite the bullet and say, Mr. Zhua, wondered left and right. Something? This sword fairy embryo from Nampo Suzhou, after the sword heart is damaged, still dared to hand the sword on the 2 battlefields of Aquarius Island and Tonggi's Hao, and now he has come here on his own initiative. It seems that he intends to use his sword against the wild world. The impression of this person has improved a lot. Chao Jun has 2 big heads. Then didn't Qin Pingon mean that you are a senior? Let me come to Jianqi Great Wall to practice swords with you? This will not admit it. If you want to talk about the truth, you can avoid it. Chao Jun asked cautiously, Mr. Zhua, did you forget something? Frowned left and right. As a sword repairman, I have something to say straight. Chao Jun cried and said, Qin Pingon suggested that I come here and practice swords with Mr. Zhua. Did not dare to tell the truth. The of Qin Pingon is the right and right junior, but not himself. Nodded left and right and said, yes. Chao Jun breathed a sigh of relief, suffocated back to suffocated, and finally did not run in vain, but could not help but curse in his heart, the hermit of the dog. My brother, did you tell you that it was my proposal to let you come here? Smiled left and right, casually stretched out a hand, gently pressed the scabbard, and only waited for a liang to toss in the south to make some movement. He could follow the sword. As for teaching Chao Jun's swordsmanship, there is actually no problem. Now Chao Jun's temperament, aptitude and character are all different from those of the young genius in South Pasuazhou in his early years. Chao Jun glanced at the action of holding down the scabbard left and right, immediately shook his head vigorously and said, "Nothing." Turned his head around, curiously asked, "Really? You tell the truth." Chao Jun bit his head and said, "Qin Pingon did say that Mr. Zhou asked me to come." Looking left and right into the distance, he seemed to be in a good mood and he smiled and said, "I can't see you with my brother." Chao Jun was stunned for a long time, but he was also a laughing person. At the northernmost part of Xingyang Mountain, a boundary marker was quietly erected one night. Go north to Luopa Mountain for 200,000 miles. An intercontinental ferry named Fengyuan came from the Middle-earth Shenzhou and hovered slowly at the Nujiaoshan ferry. The Dali capital city, which does not have a night ban, is illuminated like the day. At the gate, 2 people can step into it without any need to submit a Xianxia pass. There is not even a word of interrogation on the gate, because this pair, the young men and women who look like Daoist couples on the mountain, each have a Taiping worship card issued by the Ministry of Justice. A magnificent mixed-race Dali capital city, tonight only has 2 more peaceful cards, which is actually inconspicuous. Ning Yao Yao glanced at Dai Imperial Palace, where the ban on landscapes is good, and asked, "Where to go next? If the sword is imitation by Yujing, I will stop it. You only need to be at the palace. Make sense to others." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Don't worry, find a place and have a supper?" Ning Yao nodded, "It's up to you." After finding a supper stall, Qin Pingon took a seat and ordered 2 bowls of wontons. He drew 2 pairs of bamboo chopsticks from the bamboo tube on the table and handed them to Ning Yao. Qin Pingon held the chopsticks and faced the steaming bowl of wontons gently. After blowing a breath, she subconsciously smiled and reminded her to be careful about burning, but she soon lost a laugh, made a grimace with her, lowered her head with chopsticks and began to chew slowly. Ning Yao turned his head and looked around without taking his eyes back for a long time. When Qin Pingon raised his head and looked over, only her trembling eyelashes could be seen again. When Ning Yao finished eating, she found that Qin Pingon had sleeves with both hands and looked at herself with a smile. Ning Yao thought for a while, "Not too hungry, let's have another bowl?" Qin Pingon waved a big hand. "If you have money in your pocket, eating more bowls of wontons is nothing. There are diners on the side that slander. It depends on your kid's ability. You have to be a down-and-out quack to get such pride from a bowl of wonton." Looking at the woman who squinted and smiled again, "Bai Chong is so good-looking, and she is a really inconspicuous lady, so she will find such a pauper to live together and walk the rivers and lakes." Sort of Coming Chapter 828. After eating supper, Qin Pingon took Ning Yao for a walk, visiting the capital at night, and did not say where he must go. Anyway, he chose those brightly lit streets and strolled casually. There were constant cart vendors passing by and some were selling it. Iced desserts made of lotus roots and water chestnuts are often accompanied by a few gluttonous children behind these carts. The capital is prosperous in business, and specialized merchants set up large and small ice cellars. They dig and store ice cubes every winter and sell them in summer and autumn. In the Great Wall of Jianqi, the 2 also had such a company, but the walks at that time were hard to say for relaxation. Passing by a small martial arts hall, Qin Pingon couldn't help but smile. After the end of the battle for the capital, the 4 martial arts masters newly named by Ao Pingzhou, because Pei Qian is the youngest, still a woman and ranked second only to Song Chongjing. So it's much more famous than my master. There are many martial arts halls in the city, and many martial arts schools are here to discuss life. If you can get a reputation in the capital, you can go to the local prefectures and counties to open branches, scattered leaves and create halls. It is easy. Qin Pingon knows one of them. Boxer, because he was with the capital in his early years. After a few days and nights, he finally seized the opportunity to have a chance to compete with Grandmaster Zheng. Although it was a matter of 4 punches, this was still the young but martial artist. The mellow Zheng Seiqian gave him 3 punches first, but the golden martial artist, who was foaming at his mouth after a punch, had just returned to the capital and brought a lot of money to ask his teacher to learn art. The young man in the capital, the swinger, almost squeezed the threshold of the martial arts hall and was overcrowded. It is said that this boxer also paid the bag of golden leaves to the great master, Zheng Qingming, as medical expenses and gave him a good consecration. The first thing you do when you get up every day is not to practice boxing but to jingxiang. Ning Yao wanted to speak but stopped. Qin Pingon asked, "Is it because Pei Qian is already a sword repairer?" Ning Yao kept his promise and did not speak. Qin Pingon walked slowly. "I actually knew it a long time ago. I found the clues at Yunku Fudi, but Pei Qian has been hiding, probably because she has her own concerns, so I deliberately did not say anything. After all, not everyone can get Zhou Cheng's sword intent at the Great Wall of Jianqi casually. Therefore Pei Qian nurtures and breeds a natal flying sword. There must be some accidents, but it shouldn't be too strange." Qin Pingon didn't say something. Pei Qian is his disciple after all. Ning Yao said, "Pei Qian will soon become a genuine Golden Core realm sword repairer." Qin Pingon was taken aback, kept smiling, took off his waist to raise a sword gourd, and prepared to drink a little wine to celebrate. "Never thought that," Ning Yao said again. "Pei Qian's natal flying sword is extremely unusual. It can be divided into 7. If you are not careful, you will be born with a variety of natal magic powers. This is a very rare thing in history. There are only a handful of them. As for the number of senior sword immortals who are similar to flying swords, you like to remember these surely better than me, so whether it is according to the old rules of the Great Wall of Sword Qi to define the rank of flying swords, or you are, no matter whether it's fighting against each other or fighting on the battlefield, Pei Qian, the temporarily unnamed flying sword, should be ranked first in the new ranking of the Summer Palace. Extremely, unexpectedly rare." This is a vocabulary from Ning Yao's mouth. Qin Pingon was anxious to raise the sword gourd and did not drink a sip. Qin's Xianxia's natal flying sword, White Deer, possesses 2 kinds of natal supernatural powers, one of which is also related to cultural fate. In the 10,000-year history of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, a sword repairer with 2 or 3 natal flying swords is far more than a sword repairer with 2 or 3 magical powers for a flying sword. Simple calculations on paper seem to be the same. It's a world of difference. For example, Chaomu, a young girl practicing with Xie Songhua, owns 2 natal flying swords, Pengtuo and Hongni, and Yao Xiaoyan, who was brought to Luopashan by Qin Pingon, has 3 natal flying swords. Chun Shan, Cobweb, and Neon Clothes are just Yao Xiaoyan's flying sword magical powers. They are all guarded and tempered, so the ranks of the 3 flying swords are not high, but in private Qin Pingon is sure. Among the sword fairy embryos, Yao Xiaoyan, who has a relatively cowardly temperament, has changed a place to practice swordsmanship. She is most likely not the highest and most powerful sword repairer in the future, but she will definitely rank among the 5 highest in the future. The one without suspense. The former Great Wall of Sword Qi, with continuous wars, will not patiently wait for a genius swordsman to slowly grow up gradually. But there are flying swords with more than 2 kinds of magical powers. Just like Ning Yao said, they are indeed very few. Over the past 10,000 years, the archives of the Summer Palace have recorded less than 10. Without exception, the master of the flying sword later became a sword fairy with outstanding killing power and outstanding combat exploits. One of the most famous sword repairers is the Ascending Realm sword repairer Zhong Yuan. Zhong Yuan, who would be teased by many young swordsmen in later generations. Zhong Yuan is not as good as me. Is just a flying sword, but has 4 incredible natal magic powers. The key is 3 attacks and 1 defense, and the coordination is seamless. However, what really admires Qin Pingon is that Zhong Yuan has fought each other through battles, and through years of diligent swordsmanship he has successively found the other 3 for the flying sword that was originally only classified as the top grade C. This kind of magical powers that are compatible with the great avenues. In fact, the original flying sword magical powers were inconspicuous. In the end, Zhong Yuan grew up to be the sword repairman who has fought side by side with the old sword fairy for the longest time. Qin Pingon said, "The old sword fairy somehow asked me to take the children back to Haoren. Would you like to take them to Feixingcheng? It'll take care of the relationship between the Chinese and Earth Confucian Temple. After all, there are people with a husband and people who know Li Sheng. What's more, the sage of rites himself said that he would often go to the Confucian Temple to complain about grievances when he had something to do. Don't be too thin, don't care about success or failure, just work hard." Ning Yao shook his head. "Since it's the arrangement of the boss sword Immortal, then stay at Luopa Mountain to practice swords. Haoren, if there is only 1 dragon elephant sword sect, it's not enough. Miu Tuiwei, both of them are sword repairmen in their hometown. Oh, there is also a female sword immortal in the Yuanying realm. On the right of Sui, she has the same surname as Sui Jingqing in the Duckling Sword Lake. It's a coincidence. Qin Pingon nodded. The children stayed in Luopa Mountain temporarily, and waited until the next time Xianxia reopened. The 9 sword repairmen would choose whether to stay or leave. Qin Pingon would welcome them anyway. In the beginning, Qin Pingon wanted to collect them as direct successors. But later Cui Dongshan suggested that these children should not be too young but too high in seniority. It is better to be a disciple of the 3 generations of Ji Sifeng's genealogy, practicing in the mountains and practicing down the mountain. Qin Pingon adopted Cui Dongshan's opinion. Ning Yao suddenly said, "Someone is looking at this side from a distance no matter?" On a roof ridge in the distance, there are 6 people sitting on the ground, all of whom are young immortals, but they are extremely calm in their cultivation. They should be the people who have been fighting for a long time. Except for the Luopa Mountain, there is no other mountain in Aquarius Island that can have such 6 at the same time. The young Toshihiko with luck. Therefore it is no accident that he was a dead man carefully cultivated by a secret institution in Dali. Qin Pingon had been aware of this for a long time, but shook his head and said, "Anyway, there is no killing intent, so just let it go." There are 3 places in Beipingzu. 4 monks from other villages. No matter how they cross the river, it's best not to take their realm too seriously. One of the boundaries of Longzhou, which is of course the old Lizhu Dongtian, must be impressed by Baidi city Luqiqing. Then there is the Dali companion capital near Dadu in the central part of China. For this companion capital, Tui Huang, the master of the country, left the imitated by Yujing. The name of the person who holds the sword formation for Dali now is unknown. For the monks of the Immortal family of Aquarius Island, the strangest place is that after the sword formation moved south, they did not move north back to Dali capital. This may be the case. The Daelahu department will cost too much, of course. It may be that the national teacher has another profound meaning. This made the relationship between Emperor Dali and the feudal king Song Mu more clouded. Is it true that the relationship between Emperor Song Chongjing and the first emperor is really harmonious and intimate? Then there is this great capital city. As the best place in a country, there are 5 Qinghuang temples in the city alone. The capital Qinghuang temple is naturally the first one of the well-deserved capital, and it is also the head office of thousands of Qinghuang temples in the Great Dynasty. Every year, city gods from various prefectures and counties come here to order and discuss matters according to the rule. However, the Earth Temple with the prefix Du is not in the capital, but in the accompanying capital to the south. In addition, there are many mansions hidden in the city, not only those with official Yamen background but not identifying their identities, but also those with mountain origins but not showing the style of the Immortal family. In less than half an hour of leisurely walks, Qin Pingon saw him. Several places are quite deep. During the period, Qin Pingon and Ning Yao passed by a small Taoist temple. The face of the door was not big, the red paint was mottled, and the years were vicissitudes. There was no Taoist spiritual official door posted, only a small plaque that looked very new. Hanging couplets, the tone is not small. The pine and cypresses and golden gardens raise the real blessings, and the eternal life will be cultivated. In the night, there were no carriages and horses at the entrance of Xiaodaiguan. Qin Pingon glanced at the stone stele standing under the steps. The person who erected the stele was Wu Lingjing of Shi County, the master of Chongshu Hall, the 3-dong disciple leading the capital. Ning Yao didn't see much knowledge, so Qin Pingon helped to explain it. The 4-character opening part showed that the disciples of Sandong were talking about the Taoist lineage of the people who erected the stele. Alternate Taoist priests who are righteous and abide by the clear rules will be issued with a condolence, which will be transferred to the counselor's department for registration. As for the Taoist priests, they have even more background. The Dali court set up the Chongshu Bureau under the name of the Ministry of Ritual, to direct the affairs of a country's Taoism, and also to take charge of the 5 sacred waters and the sanctuary, and the Taoist priests in Beijing and Juzhou made a book of accounts, and the emperor. This ancestral home is Wu Lingjing, the owner of Chongshu Museum in Dali Shi County, and he must be the person in charge of the Chongshu Bureau of Dali capital. That's why he is qualified to hold the title of Tao Shijing, and is in charge of dozens of Dali Taoists in a country. Right, in short, with the Chongshu Bureau, all the Taoist affairs in Dai, the gods do not need to intervene. Qin Pingon thought for a while, but I don't remember that among the 5 monks in Aquarius, there was a Taoist named Wu Lingjing. In short, such a small place is in charge of all Taoist affairs in Dali capital and restrains all Taoist priests in the capital. In addition, the Dali court also set up a translation bureau. In the past few years, Emperor Song he also bestowed the status of Master of Sanzang on a young monk from the country of the Dali clan and opened a translation field in Beijing. During that time, Dali gathered dozens of Buddhist dragon elephants and translated more than 80 sutras. In Western Buddhist countries, the monks who have obtained the status of Sanzang master are called Buddhas. Everyone is proficient in sutras, laws, and theory. Therefore, the monks who participate in the debate of the three religions are all eminent monks with the status of Sanzang master. Is just such an inconspicuous stone monument. It will be especially meaningful in the eyes of a caring person who is familiar with officialdom. Ning Yao asked casually, "Does Dai want to support the Buddhism and Taoism that belong to the imperial court?" Qin Pingon nodded and said, "The inside is like this, but it's not too obvious in name. Therefore, the Taoist monks in the Chongshu Bureau and the Translation Bureau in the capital do not receive royal salary, and their ranks are all false titles and they are not high. Estates Daojing is nothing but the 5 ranks. In terms of official status, it is far less than that of each state to study politics. Even according to the Dali law, the local Daojing Xingjing is not considered to be a Qinglu official. To rely on the Chongshu Bureau and the Translation Bureau to gradually break the boundary between the mountains and the mountains, it is like relocating the temple's yamen on the mountain. The Dali Linhai prefectures have completely lifted the sea ban, and all have established the Sherbua division to trade the world. In addition to the Longzhou Kiln Supervision Bureau, there are also 6 weaving bureaus and weaving and dyeing bureaus. What Ning Yao worried about was Qin Ping's broken natal porcelain scattered everywhere and asked, "If that woman would neither fight you head-on, nor bow her head, she would just splatter and roll, and would not give up the natal porcelain anyway. If you decide not to reason with you, just put on a posture of killing her if you have the ability. What should you do then? Luopishen can't really kill a big empress mother like this, right?" Qin Pingon said, "Then I'll watch her roll around, cry, make trouble and hang herself. When she's over, sit down and have a good chat. Let her make trouble again. I am very good at competing with patience. So the only thing you need to do which may make you feel wronged, is just holding your nose and watching the show. Say it in advance. If you are impatient, you can leave the palace alone and wander around the capital. I'm alone over there. Besides, if you don't want to scare people with harsh words, I'm really annoying her, so I said I don't want to give up the family business of Luopa Mountain, even if I move all the hills including Jisei Peak out of Aquarius. So I will kill her too." Speaking of this, Qin Pingon laughed. "Don't you know, after you're all gone, I actually chatted with Long Jun and Li Zhen after a few habs, which is actually quite interesting." Ning Yao nodded. "It's nothing to be annoying, just treat it like watching the fun. Being in the world and standing still, one of the biggest challenges is to let people around you not misunderstand. If someone close to you wants to be insatiable for a long time, you have to rely on this clearly understanding. It will not be because of many accidents or trivial things that one day people suddenly feel that you are such a person. In fact, many misunderstandings often come from their own misunderstandings. Qin Pingon has done a good job in this matter since he was a child, so when he grew up he traveled to the Sui dynasty with Aquarius Li Huai and others. During the period, even Li Huai didn't need to say anything from Qin Pingon and he would know Qin. How personal is Pinyin? Later, when I arrived at the Great Wall of Jianqi, as long as it was about some important things related to Ning Yao, Qin Pingon always had one thing to say. Don't hide it. I would rather be angry when she listened to it, and Qin Pingon was not ambiguous. Life can't always accommodate others in everything, otherwise a good person can only be a good person for a lifetime. Often the good old people have a clear conscience which will make those close to them suffer. Qin Pingon whispered, "When you return to the colorful world in the future, don't always think about doing more for the Ascension realm. It's almost enough. Those who are able to work harder must have a degree." Ning Yao smiled and said, "It is possible that everyone in several worlds will feel that Ning Yao is among the Jade Realm, the first monk of the upper 5 realms in the colorful world, and then becomes the Fairy Realm, and the Ascendant Realm is inevitable, should be, and justified. At the same time, no matter what great feat Ning Yao made or what shocking feat he had made, it was also natural, no need to say anything. Qin Pingon doesn't think so. Why does my Ning Yao have to work so hard? You criminal officer in Quan Mansion sword repair, all you can only lie in the wine bag and rice bag to enjoy the blessing, you are not satisfied? In the future when I go to Feishing City I will bring 2 big baskets of truth and have a good talk with you." Qin Pinyin then chatted with Ning Yao about Guizhuzhou. When she heard that she was more stable, she felt a little distressed. Silly children, because children look forward to growing up every day thinking that growing up is more fun. But there are always children who don't really want to grow up but they just have to grow up. Speaking of Yu Lu and the others. Hearing that Li Huai is a sage in the academy, Ningyao was a little strange, saying that he has learned a lot. Qin Pingon couldn't help but rubbed his eyebrows and only said 4 words, which was hard to say. However, when I returned to my hometown this time, I would definitely go to the backyard of the Yang family pharmacy. Li Huai said that old man Yang had left something over there, waiting for him to see for himself. Yu Lu has long been a martial artist in the remote travel territory. Thank you, but the bottleneck in the Golden Core realm has stagnated for many years, mainly because of those trapped dragon nails in the early years. The two often traveled together, but Qin Pingon looked like they didn't like each other. It is estimated that they are really just friends. Of course, marriages in the world, love in the world, there are also many quietly looking back. Lin Shui once served as the Dadu Temple ceremony, and he is regarded as a half-official of Dali, but I heard that his relationship with his family over the years is still not harmonious. It really wasn't Qin Pingon cursing him. Lin Shui looked like a bachelor at first sight. He was so determined on the path of cultivation. Among the classmates back then, only Shi Jiachuan, who had braided horns, moved to the capital with his family first, and then naturally married as a wife and married each other. If Qin Pingon remembers correctly, Shi Jiachuan's children seem to have reached the age of marriage. Thinking of this, Qin Pingon couldn't help turning his head and glanced at Ning Yao. Some things, no matter how hard a person works, they won't be achieved after all. A small bridge with flowing water stopped. On both sides are restaurants with lights and festoons. There are countless banquets and countless restaurants. There are constantly drunk alcoholics who are helped out. Qin Pingon took Ning Yao to sit on the relatively quiet waterside steps, thinking of Zhong Yuan and Chou Miao for no reason. The 2 sword immortals, one old and one young, looked alike. One was only seen in the secret file of the summer palace and heard on the wine table. A person who used to get along day and night could have become a pinnacle sword immortal. Zhong Yuan is probably the best-known sword repairman in the history of the Great Wall of Jianqi. He is rumored to be not too handsome, gentle and not very talkative, but he is not a dull gourd. When talking to someone, listen more and talk less. There is a sincere smile in his eyes. Moreover, when Zhong Yuan was young, his sword training qualifications were not too genius. He broke the boundary time and time again, unhurriedly, not slowly and not conspicuously. In the most thrilling and severe battle of defending the city in history, Zhong Yuan fought his sword on the city head, and sword with 2 swords. If he is not killed in battle, Zhong Yuan can engrave 2 characters by himself. If there hadn't been that battle, Zhong Yuan would definitely become a 14th realm sword repairman. Is the pillar of the Great Wall of Jianqi after the rise of Qin Qingdu, Longjun and Guanzhou, and before the rise of Dong Sangying, Qin Shi and Qi Tingji. A great wall of sword qi which has stood for thousands of years between heaven and earth. Later, when he entered the summer palace and became a sorrowful seed of the hidden official line, Qin Pingon had not dared to think much for so many years. Ning Yao asked, "What are you thinking about?" Qin Pingon said, "Old sword Xian Zongyun is fascinating. Take off the hip flask and drank the wine silently so that you don't have to die." Ning Yao said, "Now there is a saying that without Zongyuan, there would be no later Great Wall of Jianqi, and without you there would be no Feixingcheng today. In the Great Wall of Jianqi, in fact, except for Qin Qingdu, Jianqiu has always called everyone by name. Not to mention disrespect." Qin Pingon took out the sword-raising gourd and laughed at himself, which under Qi Shou's hands deliberately used words to disgust me? He angrily smiled and said, "Bowl me not in Feixing City, right?" "Wait." Ning Yao shook his head. It was an old Yuanying who first said it, but it gradually spread out somehow. Many people agree with this statement. Qin Pingon took a sip of wine, a river water like a silk embroidered with red lanterns, and laughed at himself. Maybe it's because I'm far away, people who like it will like it more and people who hate it won't be that annoying. On the stone road behind the two, an old man was teaching knowledge with a young junior. He said that when he was at the wine table, how to sit at the table, what are the ordering rules, how many cold dishes, and how to order hard dishes. Don't ask the host or guest. Do you like to eat or not? Just ask if you have any restrictions. We don't need to say anything, let alone put them on the wine table. The host and guest are good wine people. After pouring the wine, he will naturally know what kind of wine it is and what year it is. When you are toasting with the host and guest, hold the cup in both hands. Don't hold the cup higher than the host and guest. The host and guest let you be free and don't take it too casually. You can drink more at the table and you can't help but talk less. Anyway, you have read those essays. Just talk about the content of the book. Don't pretend to understand if you don't understand official affairs. The rest of the guests should neither be too diligent nor negligent. These predecessors are not necessarily small-minded, but more depends on whether you young people understand the rules and whether they can be human. The young man who had just stepped into the officialdom listened earnestly and nodded lightly from time to time, but it was unavoidable that some books had not faded away. When the old man was not paying attention, the young man frowned slightly and sighed. He felt like a scholar. Have to follow a glass of wine at the dinner table, drunk. Qin Pingon turned his head and looked and listened. Naturally, these rough rules have long been understood. In fact, this young official who has just entered the public practice is fortunate enough to have a guide who is willing to give in. The real book business spirit is not that you don't know everything, but you have to be the enemy of all the old rules and customs. But I understand a lot. It doesn't matter if I come again. I just rely on my own preferences, talk and do things, to deal with this world without smoothness. After that, there was another middle-aged man who led two young women slowly past. In different wine bureaus, the men were still instructing them face to face, but the three of them were gastronauts. The two women seemed they are reluctant and a little frightened in their hearts. As genealogists, they are actually unwilling to make do with these so-called mountain wine bureaus. What about a ceremonial staff member of the city of Lijiang? And they are even more afraid of this predecessor. Will agree to some ugly deals. Although they are practicing in the mountains, they have heard about some pickled things under the mountains. I am afraid that the young and energetic member of the foreign man will be excited when he sees it. If you have any thoughts about them or simply on the wine table, your hands and feet will be dirty, and even more afraid that the elders of the teacher will follow that person and leave them alone. The man smiled bitterly and continued to patiently explain to them today's wine bureau, which is very rare, and the young and promising member of the staff has a very good official reputation. If it is not his family, it is close to our hills. Otherwise, this a fellow countryman with a successful official career. He was only in his early 30s, and he was already regarded as a secretary of the criminal ministry's yamen. Wanting to invite him out for a drink tonight is simply a dream. Qin Pingon withdrew his eyes. Ning Yao put his cheek in one hand and looked at the river. In the same posture she changed hands. Qin Pingon got up, carried the hip flask, bent over and moved and sat on the other side of her. Ning Yao muttered, "Naive." Qin Pingon smiled and said nothing but sipped the wine. Ning Yao was silent for a moment and curiously said, "We didn't deliberately cover up when we entered the city. Except for those young men and women who were watching from a distance, why didn't anyone show up? There was even no one who was secretly stalking." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "That's how the emperor hasn't made up his mind on how to deal with us. If I were the only one, I wouldn't be so embarrassed. Dali Court never used to any monk on the mountain. This is not Song's domineering but emboldened. Only Ning Yaotai is an exception. The first person in the colorful world ascending realm sword repair, Ning Yao of the Great Wall of Sword Qi." Dali provoked her, not talking about Ning Yao himself, just talking about the involvement. The nearer is tantamount to provoking the sword repairman of Beiju Luzhou, and the farther there are Qi Tingji and Lu Ji's dragon elephant sword sect. Qin Pingon said, "The Song family of Dali gives way to the chessboard and waits for me to take the lead. For example, go straight to the palace, the old kiln apprentice in Nipping Lane, who has to set up the table to turn over the old account. If you go to Ichi Lane looking for Chao Xuanshou is a businessman who talks about business. Looking for a friend, Guan Iran, is a genealogist who travels in the mountains and water. Going to the ruins of the old Mountain Cliff Academy is a direct disciple of the line of Wensheng. No matter where you go inside the palace there are countermeasures. But when we wander around like this, Your Majesty the Emperor and the Empress Dowager might have a supper together." Qin Pingon paused for a moment and said with a smile, "So in a while, we will go to the brother's house to settle down." Ning Yao turned his head with some questions in his eyes. "She is reluctant to think about things tonight." Qin Pingon explained in a soft voice. "It's equivalent to telling Dali that I'm careful about what I do, so you Dali have to retaliate with each other. Anyway, no one needs to make a fuss. Jade is in the mountains and the vegetation is moist, the pearls grow in the depths, but the cliffs are not dry. This is the words of the husband in the book. which are widely circulated and will be passed on from generation to generation. Like a dream, his husband will be a sage in the book. And when Qin Ping settled in this capital, he would find that there were traces of the elder brother Cui Yong's education everywhere. The reason why Ao Pingzhou is still Ao Pingzhou is that the two seniors, through 100 years of dedication, continue to gather people's hearts, and finally make a continent of mountains and rivers heroes together, can work together to turn the sky. Then Qin Pingon, a junior, would not wantonly ruin this great situation, but it was not because of how Luopishan feared the Song family. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Let's take a break over there. I will check if there are any rare books in the library and move to Luopa Mountain." Ning Yao asked, "Stealing books?" Qin Pingon put down the hip flask, arms around his chest. He smiled. "As a junior, I borrow a few books from my senior. How can it be considered stealing?" Who stopped and ignored things. Ning Yao casually said, "Xiaomi Li listened to Pei Qian and Jing Dafeng said that you have a good friend Fan Er and Lao Longqing. Have you ever made an agreement?" Qin Pingon laughed and said, "You said Fan Er. He was young and ignorant at that time and always had some strange ideas. Fortunately, I was dissuaded." Qin Pingon has never drunk flower wine in his life. Only passed the brothel hook in the Nanyuan Guojingcheng, and had experienced the powdery gas that could not be avoided. Ning Yao remembered something. "I previously broke the jade card of the abbot of the Sword Top Formation?" Qin Pingon smiled and said, "It's actually a good thing. If you don't break it, I will find a chance to do it myself." The first-line peak of the Bamboo Emperor, without the constraints of the full moon peak Xia Yunsui and Qiu Lingshan Tao Yanbao, with Yen Chu's refuge again, the sovereign of Zhuhuang will become a complete one. The family is dominated in Xingyang Mountain, and the civil strife in Xingyang Mountain will soon stop. Now it's good the Bamboo Emperor is at least counted. Within a year he lost the greatest reliance of a sword top formation Immortal, just the peak master of the first-line peak Yupu Realm Sword Repair. This way there are more variables. Qin Pingon raised his head and took a sip of wine, wiped his mouth and continued, "Tao Yanbao will definitely take the initiative to rely on Xia Yuntue and seek ways to break the situation in Qiu Lingshan, such as forming a private contract and renting his own sword repair to Full Moon. Feng, it is even possible to persuade the Uncle Xia to fight for the position of the Supreme Master. As a reward, it is the early lifting of the ban on the Qiu Lingshan mountain sealing order. As for the wall grass, Yan Chu will definitely stir the flames for himself and Shulongfeng seek greater benefits, because once the next sect master chooses Yuan Bai, Xingyang Mountain will have more variables and the situation is subtle and complicated. The Emperor of Bamboo just wants to solve these internal problems, every 35 years, never want to settle." Qin Pingon casually wiped his left hand. In the past years the lotus roots, the old master's context theory, is by no means a panacea for everything, but it is definitely the best tool for trekking through mountains and rivers. Qin Pingon hung a sword gourd on his waist, stretched out a hand, twisted a reflection of the light from the river, and condensed into a small and exquisite lantern, placed in the air, lanterns hovering in the air, bending around, barely a line like a road, and then twisted two subtle water transports from the river and placed them on both sides of the lantern. Qin Pingon said, "Most people will step into it because the road is obvious, so it's better to go. If you go bigger, this is the general trend, destiny." Pointing to the gap between the two lanterns again, the ups and downs of people's minds during this period, and the various changes brought about by different life journeys, actually don't need to be studied carefully. Besides, if you really need to manage it, you may not be able to manage it. Maybe it will backfire. Certainly someone will be able to get out of this path, but it does not matter. For Xingyang Mountain, this is a real good thing, and it is also something I have been really looking forward to. This is what Qin Pingon learned from Jing Juzhong and Wu Shuangjiang. One is good at calculating the human heart and the other is good at solving everything. Qin Pingon thought for a while and said, for example, in the small town Xingyang Mountain was determined to win the sword scripture. Qingfeng City was going to the Pitcha. This is the inevitable way of life. If I take myself for example, Gu Qian's Shaking Mountain boxing book is a lantern. Qin Ping'an from Ni Ping Alley will definitely learn boxing because he wants to save his life. Ning Yao said, there is also the wooden figure from Song Jisen's house next door. You will definitely put it together and let me explain the meridians for you? Qin Pingon nodded and said, that's the truth. Many accidents are inevitable. But a series of inevitables will appear in case an accident. Ning Yao frowned, worried. Qin Pingon turned around, moved her brows softly, smoothed her brows and laughed softly. As the old saying goes, looking at the old at 3 years old is just a general situation. You may not really be able to see a person to death. No one will definitely become who there is nothing in the world. What is destined? Even Zhou Zi, who sold candied haws back then, didn't really deliberately target me back then. He must embarrass a child. To be precise, Zhou Zi is like waiting for a choice and some results. Then wait and see. This is the same as the truth that I have always warned myself, that there is no way for people to call themselves for good or fortune. In fact, it does not conflict. Later, I read a sentence from Ashing in the book which is similar to the truth, saying, "Everything is ready for me." I was in the Confucian temple Gongda Lin chatting with my husband, and my husband said these words of Yashing, very good and well-intentioned. Many people who were cold-eyed behind the scenes of Lizhu Cave did not necessarily enter the game in person. They were just betting around and fueling the flames. At most they were digging riverbeds or pulling lakes and building dams. It's like we use a cheap one. If you buy a lot of calligraphy and painting, you will think that this person is getting more and more famous and the price is getting higher and higher. One day if you change hands it will be a sky-high price. It is easy to grab huge profits. Old Man Yang was the shop in our hometown. The people of Ma Kushuan, Song Jisun, Lu Xianyang, Gukan, Zhao Yu, Xieling, etc. may have each made their own bets. But the methods are different and quiet, and then who can be at a critical moment when you step up to a higher level, others will continue to bet. If they fail, they may be unknown or the main road may have died and they will move on to a completely different path of life. Similarly, Brother Cui Huang also bet there are many people including Wu Yuan, Wei Li, Lu Qingfeng and Wei Liang. Among them, Lu Qingfeng will not necessarily become the official book of the Ministry of Rites in the accompanying capital of Dali. Qin Pingon, who has not left his home at the age of 14, met Lu Xianyang's catastrophe, and told him that he should not call the earth and the earth is not working. If you have the opportunity to come back, you will definitely choose another life. You will be the one who took the bunch of candied haws, and become an apprentice kiln worker one day, even if you burn porcelain all your life and live in peace and stability. But today I will definitely not choose this way. Even if I have the opportunity, I will choose the same path to walk here. As for the future, there are too many things to help you. Ning Yao asked softly, "What will happen in the future?" Qin Pingon had firm eyes and smiled. "Even if I am given 10,000 different choices in the future, I will not choose any more." Ning Yao had bright eyes and nodded lightly. After Qin Pingon took Ning Yao to a place, crossing the streets and alleys, knowing the door and the road without asking people for directions at all, Qin Pingon seemed to be walking around his mountain. Passing by the Ichi Lane, this place is mostly rich and powerful Chinese people who have had hairpins for generations. The Cheer Street not far away is almost all Jiang Hongmen, whose ancestral home is in Erling Lane and Nipping Lane. The two surnames are also related to Yi Ran and Lu Xuanmei. The residences in the capital are located on these two streets. They are notoriously a radish and a pit. Even if they were rewarded by meritorious service, there were many new faces in the officialdom of Dali and they were able to enter the temple central but still can't care about Qixiang and Cheer Street. At the intersection of a secluded alley, two gas trainers appeared, one the old and the young blocking the way. The realm of is not high, one yuan ing, one longmen realm. The old man said indifferently, "No matter who it is, take a detour." Qin Pingon pointed to the inside of the alley and said with a smile, "I am the younger brother of the owner of the house inside." Then added, "Come here to read." The young man sneered and said, "The junior of the national teacher? Why don't you say that you are the senior of the national teacher? Who doesn't know that our Dali national teacher, embroidery tiger Cui Yun, has been out of Wensheng's line for more than 100 years? Where did the younger brother? It seems that the liar in Beijing today is a bit bolder and has a lot of tricks." The old man seemed to be an expert hermit who didn't care about the world. He waved his hand and said, "Hurry up." Qin Pingon was a little helpless. How could the Dali court let these two guards here? So he turned his head and asked Ning Yao, "Shall we find an inn nearby?" Ning Yao naturally does not matter. In fact, it is not difficult for the two to sneak into the mansion. Compared with the bright nights in other parts of the capital, the night on this street is heavy. Qin Pingon said for no reason, "Pure freedom requires sacrifice of humanity." Ning Yao wondered, "What do you mean?" Qin Pingon smiled and said, "It's meaningless." Then he took an elbow, grinned and found an inn. When he asked, there was only one room. Qin Pingon sighed and asked for money. Sort of coming. Chapter 829. The shopkeeper of the inn is an old river and lake. The inn's business is good, but it is not so good that there is only one room left. The old man just looks at the man in the blue shirt who walks the river and lake with the sword on his back. It is still pleasing to the eye. The clothes are neat and he looks kind, not like it. If you are a troublemaker you can help, but you can't help in vain. When you ask for a price you will ask for a few taels of silver. In the end the shopkeeper is afraid of being scolded and kindly used as a donkey. I never thought that the man turned his eyes back immediately without saying anything. He can't see it, he's kind of old-fashioned on the road. The shopkeeper received a few pieces of silver. It was a large official silver that traveled one continent. After being weighed on the scale the corners were cut and some were returned to the man. The old man took 2 more customs clearance documents and wrote a note. The yamen wanted those who check the account books and case books. If they are not right they will have to go to court. The old man glanced at the man, feeling in his heart, where to buy youth with $10,000. It's good to be young. There are some things that you want be powerless. As the old saying goes, beauty kills young people, but the man in blue shirt in front of him is not too young to see him. Why are you still like a chick? Could it be that he was born in the martial art of Jianghu? His reputation is not strong enough. He patronizes his strength and martial arts and can't care about finding a wife? This pair is like a man and a woman who traveled away from their hometowns. In terms of the customs, the ancestral homes of both parties are in Huaihuang County, Celadon County, Longzhou Celadon, Qinpingon and Ningyao. Since we are a native of Dali, the old man is even more kind-hearted. When the payment was still closed he couldn't help but smile and asked, "Since you are from Longzhou, don't you just look up and you can see Monarch Wei Dashan's Cloud Mountain? That's a good place. I heard from my friends that there seems to be a place called Hongzhou Town, where the 3 rivers converge, a treasured land of feng shui, and the Lord of Water god of Chongdan River, asking for the success of the imperial examination, or the Empress of Water god of Yuye River. Seeking marriage, each has its own efficaciousness." Qin Pingon smiled and nodded. "It seems to be like this. This time when we return to our hometown we will all have to take a look." The old shopkeeper was really talkative and suddenly became addicted to small talk. He didn't rush to hand in the door key, leaned against the counter, pushed a plate of peanuts to the man with his fingers and said with a smile, "I heard that you are in Longzhou. In addition to Lord Weispiun Mountain, there are many landscape temples and there is also a ferry crossing. Then you can see the traces of the gods every day? It's not possible here in the capital. The government is strictly controlled and the gods on the mountain dare not wind up. Come and go." Obviously it was Kualong Prefecture, but in the final analysis, the old man still praised himself as a native city of Lijing. Qin Pingon looked at the multi-treasure rack behind the counter, placed large and small porcelains and nodded with a smile. Longzhou is naturally not comparable to Jingshi. The rules are heavy here. Hidden dragons and tigers are just inconspicuous. By the way, the shopkeeper likes it. Porcelain which is unique. The old man's eyes lit up and he met an expert? The old man lowered his voice and said, "I have a piece of porcelain that is the treasure of the town shop. People who have seen it say it is an old object that is over 100 years old. It was fired in your Longzhou official kiln. It is considered to be missing 10 taels of silver. My friend said it was a sharp item that opened the door at a glance. He asked me to ask me for 200 taels of silver. I didn't lack the money so I didn't sell it. Do you understand? Help palms. It's a piece of powder and white glaze. The big vase, the rare 8-character G language, is painted with characters." The old man raised his hand and gestured for height. The vase was about half a person tall. Qin Pingon thought for a while and said softly, "It must have been less than 100 years, at most 40 years. During the Yuanshou period, a batch of large pieces of auspicious language were actually fired and the number is small. The old rules of the long kiln: if the color is not good they will be broken up. Except for the officials of the Supervision and Inspection Department, no one can see the whole device. As for the good ones, of course they can only put them somewhere." Qin Pingon stretched out a finger and smiled and pointed to the palace. The old man sighed. It seemed that he had spent a fortune. He never thought that the man picked up peanuts from the small dish, chewed it lightly and continued, "Such a large piece is already worth more than a sitting piece and a lying piece. It is also a top-notch character piece. Flowers, birds and beasts are incomparable, and 8-character official kiln pieces are especially rare. They are generally 4-character or 6-character pieces. If I remember correctly, all dragons, the mouth of the kiln has only been fired for 3 years, and now there are some new officials imitating officials, but the masters of the dragon kiln who have been able to walk these years, otherwise they will be older and bring out disciples and grandchildren, plus the royal tribute that was only sent to the palace in the past has become an ordinary official kiln with a lower level. Therefore the firing technique is not as good as that in the past. The shopkeeper, the vintage glaze and the identification are all correct. Over there, I just heard that some large pieces of ordinary quality have also flown into the local private households in such a small number. Of course, it is more likely that some masters left the dragon. After the kiln, the imitation official money that I burnt in private is also very valuable. If there is no accident, the treasure of the shopkeeper is worth at least this amount. The old man looked at the man raising a palm and said in surprise, "Can you sell 500 taels of silver?" Qin Pingan smiled and said nothing. In fact, he said everything that should be said. As for true or false, it is not important nor important. Anyway, the old treasurer, like a person who should listen to it, has also listened. The old man suddenly smiled and said, "Since it's worth 500 taels, I will sell you 300 taels?" Qin Pingan smiled and said, "The shopkeeper, do you think I am someone with so much spare money? Besides, the shopkeeper forgot where I am from?" The old shopkeeper laughed and gave the man a thumbs up. Ning Yao looked at the guy who was talking and laughing when he first met. When you go to the countryside, you can talk to anyone and talk to others. If we continue to talk like this, it is estimated that the shopkeeper will be able to move out the wine, and eventually even the money from the store will be returned. Qin Pingan lay on the counter and asked casually with the old shopkeeper, "Is there any excitement in Beijing recently?" This place in the capital has never lacked excitement. Unusual promotion and relegation of officialdom, the presence of immortal masters on the top of the mountain, the fame of great masters of the rivers and lakes, the major water and land law conferences, the talks of scholars, and the poems of writers are all when the people talked after dinner. What's more, today's Aquarius, especially the Dali government, are more and more interested in inquiring about other family affairs in the other 8 continents of Hauran. The old man nodded and said, "Yes, why not? There will be a discussion on the side of the Buhua temple in 2 days. It will be 2 of the 4 great masters of Wuping. Didn't you 2 come here?" Among the 4 great masters of Wuping, the 2 martial artists in the mountain realm had a battle in Dali capital. One was an old man from the old Zhuang dynasty. He had been famous for a long time. He was 150 years old. In the year he fisted into the realm of transformation on the battlefield, and he was a martial artist. The other is a woman Wu Fu from the small southwest coastal country of Aquarius. Her name is Zhou Haijing. Before Wu Ping was released, she had no reputation at all. It is said that she was able to achieve her physique and realm by fighting tides, and she was said to be quite handsome. The 56-year-old mother-in-law is not old at all. So nowadays many young people from the martial arts and the squatters in the capital are yelling one by one. If the old shopkeeper was young when it was just 2 martial arts masters in the golden frame, you could find a place in the capital, and the crowds were filled with crowds, and the General Seed brothers of Cheer Street would inevitably be sent out. Nowadays, even if it is the questioning of the 2 great masters of Wu criticism, it is said that they have to get approval from the Ministry of Rights and the Ministry of Criminal Justice in advance, and both parties still need to sign a contract under the witness of the government, which is troublesome. However, the most talked about in the temples of the capital and the officialdom of Xianxia is definitely the splendid Jingjiang Mountain celebration, Lu Xianyang, the protagonist of Longquan Jianzong, and Luopa Mountain's joint ceremony, especially the Qingshan Fengli of the mountain lord Qin Pingan. Not a sword fairy but a great master of martial arts. Sure enough, in Aquarius Island, in addition to the Dali cavalry, there is a sword aura like a rainbow, and my martial arts are prosperous. Perhaps in the past years on the ferry at Daoist, how the out-of-town youth viewed Li Tuanjing in Fenglei Garden. So nowadays, there are countless young people in the mountains and rivers. How do they feel about Qin Pingan in the Luopa mountain? Qin Pingan shook his head and said, "We are from a small sect. We were busy on the road this time and we didn't even hear about it." Although the old man was still very happy in the conversation, he wanted to take this man named Qin Pingan to drink, but he still handed the key. The spring night is worth $1,000, so don't delay other people's earning money. From the beginning to the end, Ning Yao didn't say anything. Qin Pingon paid for the bill at a thunderous time before, but she didn't say anything to stop her. At this moment she followed Qin Ping's and walked in the corridor. Ning Yao's feet were steady and breathing was steady. When Qin Pingon opened the door and stood sideways, Ning Yao just stepped over the threshold and took a seat. Something is wrong. Feeling to be beaten. Standing in place, Qin Pingon asked tentatively, "I'll go and grind with the shopkeeper again to see if I can make a room again?" Ning Yao took off the sword box, stood it casually at his feet, picked up the porcelain jug and poured a glass of water. "Did you drink less by the river? Don't you sober up first?" Qin Pingon closed the door gently but didn't lock the door. He didn't dare. After taking a seat, he took the teacup and just picked it up. He heard Ning Yao ask, "Every time you walk the rivers and lakes, you will carry so many customs clearance documents with you?" Qin Pingon finished drinking the water and said, "Like a robe, more is better just in case you need it." Ning Yao squinted his eyes and said, "What about my share? Although it is fake at first glance, I haven't seen you temporarily forge it this way before entering the capital." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "You have to stay in Howren for many years. It is always useful. For example, I will take you to see Big Brother Su and Xianyu in the future. I was thinking about taking precautions a while ago. By coincidence, this is not true. Comes in handy. Finally found such an inn, right? Before on the street, I glanced at the duobao shelf behind the counter. Seeing that I had a chance, I really had a chat with the shopkeeper." Ning Yao stopped asking more questions, nodded and praised. "The context is clear, there is reason and evidence. It is both accidental and inevitable and I can't fault it." Qin Pingon said, "I'll go to that alley later and check the books at the brother's house." Ning Yao was non-committal, got up and opened the window, lying on the table with his cheeks against the table looking out the window because the inn was relatively close to Ichi Lane and Cheer Street, with bright lights everywhere in the field of vision. There were candle lights for banquets, and some young men and women climbed up to admire the moon. Qin Pingon rarely saw such a lazy Ning Yao. He poured himself a cup of tea, craned his neck secretly and looked at Ning Yao's back. It seemed that compared with the Jianqi Great Wall, there was a slight change, a little thinner. Qin Pingon actually knows a little about women's hair bun style, eyebrow powder, clothing and hairpin. Qin Pingon actually knows a little bit. After reading a lot of miscellaneous books he will remember it, but the young master has learned 18 martial arts, but it is useless. There is a small regret in the place of martial arts. And Ning Yao does not need these. With his back to Qin Pingon, Ning Yao always lay on the table and asked, "Before the frontline peak, how did you come up with your swordsmanship?" Qin Pingon immediately retracted his gaze and replied with a smile. "On the other side of the city, I'm not busy anyway, just thinking about it every day." Before the broken natal porcelain, Qin Pingon had the qualifications of Earth Immortals. It does not mean that he could become a golden elixir or a land immortal who bred Yuaning, just like a sword repairer with the title of Sword Fairy Embryo. Of course he does not necessarily become Sword Fairy. Moreover, there are countless people who have the aptitude for cultivation but have poor luck. They may be a little mediocre for a lifetime, but also stable compared to the magnificent waves of cultivation on the mountain. Ning Yao turned his head and said, "The lifeline of the porcelain is related to the lifeline of the Dali court. It is the foundation for the rise of the Song family. There are too many deliberate and disgraceful plans. Only the bridge built by the abbot of Song Yuzhang in the town. You can't see it. If you want to turn over the old account, you will definitely get your whole body involved. The emperors of the Song family in the past 100 years seem to be tough in doing things. I don't think they can be kind." Qin Pingon nodded and said, "I know how to count." Ning Yao suddenly said, "Is it possible that Cui Yong hopes that you will become a solitary cultivator?" Qin Pingon had sleeves with both hands, stretched his feet under the table and a pair of cloth shoes touched lightly. He looked casual and relaxed. After thinking about it, he nodded and said, "It seems a bit." In fact, among the 4 seniors, the one who really taught Qin Pingon to study is the left and right. But isn't this going to push you to the Dao sect FA channel? It's just possible but not inevitable. Just like Lu Ji and Xiao Deng of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, they are both pure but they may not be close to the Dao sect. Ning Yao was silent for a moment and said, "Are you a believer in Buddha?" Qin Pingon smiled and said, "I have believed since I was a child." Ning Yao was dumb as if that was the case. Qin Pingon said softly, "In addition to pragmatic and useful knowledge, you should learn more. In fact, good knowledge should be learned even if it is a little retreat. According to Cui Dongshan, as long as it is a human, no matter who it is, as long as this life is here. In the world there is a great dispute, a dispute between the truth and the truth inside and outside. Finding the truth from the Confucian sage books, helping yourself get along with the world. Besides, it is good to believe in Buddhism or learn from Buddhism or Xianxia to cultivate Taoism. I won't participate in the 3 religious controversies. I only adhere to one purpose and seek endless learning with my life. People are born on their first birthdays, but they go up the mountain late and go downhill. Entering Wanshan encirclement, one mountain releases one mountain barrier. Every person who is optimistic by nature is the king of the subjective world. Then a naturally pessimistic person needs to build houses, pavilions and ferry crossings, shelter from wind and rain, and stop to rest in the small world of mind. Ning Yao turned around and asked, I heard from Xiaomi Li that my sister Yuan Bao likes Chao Sunny and my younger brother Yuan Lai likes Tsin Yuanji. Xiaomi Li is probably the biggest ear reporting on Luopa Mountain. It seems that there is no gossip that she does not know. It is indeed the right guardian who patrols the mountain every day. Qin Pingon said suddenly, it's no wonder that Yuan Bao's words on the mountain are so sharp and aggressive. Most of them want to use this to attract Chao Sunny's attention. Yuan Lai likes to read books at the foot of the mountain. Since I didn't go to Jing Daifeng's novels, what are the pictures? Turned out to be to see the girl he likes. Good fellow, young very early. Much better than my mountain lord. Ning Yao asked, will you still stare at Xingyang Mountain in the future? 100 years? Qin Pingon couldn't help but smiled and shook his head. Actually, I don't need to stare. This is the same as Li Shuipiao of Zhongtu Jiazhengziangwen, as well as the chief guest of Luzhou in Beiju. It's like a villain once came to the door and deliberately lost a boot in someone else's house before leaving. In fact, it doesn't matter if the guest won't take it back, but the host would not think so. Ning Yao sat up. Qin Pingon had already poured a cup of tea and handed it over. She took a sip from the teacup and asked, Luopa Mountain must be closed to seal the mountain? You can't learn from Master Wan of Longquan Jianzong, accept it and decide. Do you want to include it in the genealogy? Qin Pingon shook his head and said, even if you can manage the dozens or even hundreds of people who are born out of thin air, they are destined to not be able to control the hearts of the people. I am not worried about Zhu Lian and the long lives of them. I am worried about Nuanshu, Millet and Chen Lingjun's children, as well as young people like Tsin Yuanji, Jiang Chu and Jur, are crowded with people in the mountains, and the hearts of the people are complicated. At most, it is a moment of excitement. If you are not careful, you will become a little bit unhappy. Anyway, Luopa Mountain is not short of manpower for the time being. On the side of Tongyi's his next sect, Mi Yu and the others can accept a few more disciples. Qin Pingon is not Jing Juzhong and Wu Shuangjiang after all. Zheng Juzhong can see the details of the people in Baidi City, and Wu Shuangjiang can teach all the monks in Sui Chuayao by himself. How can Qin Pingon have such an ability? Not only was the state of difference compared to these two great monks, but also Qin Pingan's mood, which was much worse than Jing Juzhong and Wu Shuangjiang. At this moment, they are rushing to the land boundary of Longzhou, looking for the cultivating embryos of immortal fate. I dare not say all of them. I only say most of them. They must be fame and fortune. It is not easy to visit the mountains and seek the truth. There is no problem, but Qin Pingon is worried. Things have always been different from ordinary mountain masters and suzerains. For example, in the end, how to divide the seeds of millet grains will become a major event in Luopa Mountain that is ups and downs and undercurrents. In the end, it will be the millet grains that will be sad, and it may even make it difficult for the little girl to happily distribute the seeds in this life. There is a difference between relatives and sparseness. We must first protect my heart and place, which is extremely rare in Luopa Mountain, before we can talk about the practice of taking care of others. Qin Pingon smiled for no reason. When I feel that a mountain artifact is not so valuable, I need to be careful and vigilant. Ning Yao glanced at him, either earning money or counting money, and then earning money after counting the money. Since childhood, Ning Yao was so obsessed with money that Ning Yao had an eye-opener. To this day, Ning Yao still remembers that night the strawshoe boy ran with a big basket on his back. Go to Longshu River to pick up stones. Qin Pingon laughed at himself. When I was young, I was afraid of being poor. Ning Yao shook her head. She knew that was not the case. A fan of money is a fan of money, but Qin Pingon is a person who doesn't have much external demand as long as he can eat and wear. Qin Pingon stood up suddenly and smiled. I have to go to the alley and meet a high official of the Ministry of Rights. Maybe I will go to the Renyun Iyun building to read a book later. You don't need to wait for me. Rest early. Ning Yao did not speak. Qin Pingon stepped out, shrank the mountains and rivers, left the inn quietly, and appeared in a quiet alley without lights. Ning Yao lay on the table again, frowning slightly. It was you who were going to read the book. I didn't say anything. What else do you want? An old man walked hurriedly out of the imperial city. After boarding a carriage, the roaring sound of the carriage rang all the way. He was originally going to an inn, but it was approaching the destination. The carriage changed its route slightly and served as the coachman of the royal worship of Dali, said it was going to the house of the national teacher Tui Yang, and Qin Pingon was waiting there. At the corner of the street that blocked Qin Pingon's footsteps, separated by a line in the seemingly dark and cramped alley, there is actually a hole in the sky. It is a 3-acre white jade square which is known as the Snail Dojo on the mountain. It can be placed in the Qi Palace and then placed on the spot after being taken out. It is a treasure on the mountain that is close to the square inch. The old monk Yuanying was sitting in meditation, and the cultivator who wouldn't wait for it to become 24 at 12 a day. But the young monk in the Dragon Gate realm was punching and screaming tonight. In Qin Pingan's view, he was beaten in a quack-like style with spicy eyes. He created a crazy sword technique with Pei Qian back then. Virtue. The old monk still failed to notice the existence of an unexpected guest nearby. After running the Qi machine for a little week, he was so quarreled by his disciples that he opened his eyes and reprimanded, Duanming, cherish the time of Taoism, don't be involved in this kind of thing. Splurge, if you really want to learn boxing, please find a boxing master. Anyway, your family is not short of money, and you no longer have the qualifications to practice martial arts. Find a martial artist in the remote travel world, pinch your nose to teach you boxing. It is not difficult, better than being here every day. Punch Wanba punches and poke Lao Tzu in the eyes. The young man's surname is Zhao, his name is clear, his body is upright, his Taoist heart is bright, and his name has a good meaning. It's a pity that the homophony of the name is terrible. The teenager always thinks that if his surname is Li, it would be better if someone else laughs at himself. It's very simple. You only need to report your name to find the place. The boy was born in Dali, a first-class Huguandi, Zhao from Tianshui, one of the surnames of Dali Shangju State, and Zhao Duanming is still a long-term son. Among all the surnames of Shangju Kingdom in Dali, Yuan, Chao and Guan are the first. Then there is the Yu family and the Zhao family in Tianshui, and then the Fufengqiu family, the Poyangma family and the Zijiayan family. Zhao Duanming asked while punching, Master, how old do you think Zhou Haijing is? Is it really 56 years old? Doesn't look like it. I looked at her from a distance. Tusk, good health. I like Chao Jiugui very much. I made an appointment with Chao Jiugui. Turning back, Zhou Haijing was fighting with people at the Huoshan temple. He would definitely help me pick a good seat. Look closer, Wu Fu asked Quan if the woman wears a night walk again. He. The old man laughed and said, in the future your kid will not hang out with Chao Sekui. The martial arts masters like Zhou Haijing are superb in their martial arts, and they are often skilled in beauty. They can't tell the true age based on their looks. They are almost the same as our Chimen. And remember, don't stop you from watching the game, but you must keep your eyes on it. I heard that Zhou Haijing's temper is very bad and he is far from Jing Qian's talkative. The teenager stopped his fist and stood still, grinning and said, age is not a problem. The female junior holds gold bricks. Master, you can calculate it. How many gold bricks can I hold? The old man rolled his eyes and said, it's really unreasonable that you can practice as far as your kid's arithmetic is. Zhao Duanming rubbed his chin. They are all the 4 great masters of Wu Ping. Zhou Haijing ranked bottom, but his looks and body are better than Jing Qian. Qin Pingan concealed his figure, standing on the wall not far away, originally focusing more on the carriage, and by the way remembered the words of the boy. As for the high-rise roof of the Tianlu Pavilion in the capital, the young monks were still there and Qin Pingan took a few more glances. Everyone hung a waist card, but it was not an innocent card issued by the Xing Department's Yamen. They only engraved one word, all of which were picked from the 12 earthly branches. It seems that among the 6, one is Confucianism, Buddhism and Taoism, one is sword repairman, one is Fulu monk and one is military monk. And they are all very rich, not to mention the outermost clothing, wearing the highest rank of warrior and weft armor in the military jiamaru, and then covering a robe. It seems that they will fight with others at any time. At this moment, it seems that someone is starting to sit in the village. A young woman, besides the treasure armor and the robe, was wearing a round-necked Yunjin robe produced by the Jiankong Sports Agency. She spread her hands and said with a smile, "I'm sitting in the village. Just bet that Qin Jianxian would go to the palace tonight and lose one." The other 5 people threw out fairy money one after another. Most Xiaoshu money, 2 Guyu money, and some gave only 1 snowflake money. He was a soldier monk who looked like a little girl, wearing a gorse feather makeup veil, moonlight lingling. The satin surface is like flowing water. The young woman wondered, "That's it?" With arms around her chest, the little girl said depressed, "Auntie is really out of money today." The young Taoist priest sat cross-legged and said with a smile, "I have accumulated so much dowry money over the years, and I can take it out and make a big bet." A young monk with a clean eyebrow, wearing a veiled Zen robes, put his hands together and said, "Buddha bless my disciples to continue their gambling luck today." The 6 monks, including those with the surname of Zhuguo on their heads, and those with parents from the mountain Dao couples, and even those from poor families, were all carefully collected by Nianganlang from the Department of Penalty, the oldest but 90, the youngest is a teenager. Apart from them, there are a total of 11 people and 12 earthly branches, and now only 1 position is left empty, and a pure martial artist is missing. They don't have a fixed preacher and they don't have an official patriarchal genealogy identity, but among the masters of boxing, there is Song Chongjing among several great masters. They just didn't give much advice, just a few times. In addition, there are the Mo family rangers, the swordsmen Su Week. The people who taught them how to look for aura were the former mountain monarchs of the old mountains of Dai, as well as a few outsiders with hidden backgrounds and unobtrusive ethics. There are 6 people present and everyone has a natal thing belonging to the 5 elements. They own the 5-color soil of the new 5 sacred mountains of Aquarius Island, the Dadu water transport of Zinkidu, and consume a lot of gold and copper money as well as the locust tree and a kind of water. Fire. Qin Pingon jumped off the wall and appeared at the corner of the street, no longer hiding his breath, quietly waiting for the arrival of the courtesy minister, who was actually an acquaintance, the old servant Dong Hu. Old Yuanying put away the dojo and stood with his disciple Zhao Duanming in the alley. The old man frowned and said, "Here again? Is this place where you can go anywhere? Why don't young people now listen to persuasion and have to wait until it hurts to remember?" Qin Pingon smiled and said, "I'm harassing the old immortal master's practice. Who'll be waiting for someone here? Maybe after the chat I can go to the house to read." The old monk shook his head and was too lazy to say something. At most he turned his head and asked at the yamen of the Xing department, saying that he was a person with no eyesight and he didn't need to make a fuss. The old man stopped abruptly, turned his head and looked around. After the carriage stopped, he walked out of the Dong Shirlang of the Ministry of Rites. Qin Pingan's main action said, "I have seen Mr. Dong Lao." Dong Hu hurriedly stretched out his hand and raised the young mountain owner's arm falsely. "Master Qin, I can't use it." After the old attendant laughed, he bit his head and said, "Dare to ask Qin Shan, what do you mean by visiting the capital?" Qin Pingon smiled and asked, "What does your majesty mean?" Dong Hu said cautiously, "It depends on what Qin Shanju means." On the far side of the roof, a woman with holding a hip flask appeared. The young woman who had just collected money from the farm smiled and said, "Aunt Feng." The woman's voice was natural and charming and she smiled, "You are not courageous, just sit under the eyes of others." The young woman asked in surprise, "Aunt Feng, he found us long ago?" On the side of the alley, Qin Pingon heard the words of the Aunt Feng, and he actually confessed to the old servant and came and went as soon as he said. It was a flash away and went straight to the roof. Dressed in a precarious blue shirt, he suddenly appeared, standing at the scalloped eaves. The woman looked at Qin Pingon and asked with a smile, "What's the matter?" Qin Pingon said, "I only heard his voice but didn't see him. I didn't expect to see seniors here."